against him. But let's not get hung up on that, because that trial is not going to happen anytime soon. The question for you to end this interview is, what's the end game for Russia? Because, as we've discussed, you right now control 18% of Ukrainian territory. Zelensky says there's no peace while that persists. You say that it's now Russian sovereign territory. Where is Russia prepared to compromise?
I don't think that it will be a compromise. It will be the end game with Ukraine will be a country non-aligned, non-nuclear, with normal relations with its neighbors. It will not have a NATO membership. It will be demilitarized. And finally,
you will withdraw fully, will you, from its territory?
And finally, it will abolish all racist laws that it has taken during all these years.
Will Russia withdraw from the territory that it occupies in Ukraine?
I don't think so, because earlier, when we conducted negotiations in 2022, that was an option, a possibility. Right now, I am sure that these 4 regions will belong to Russia.
Ambassador Andrei Kelin, we have to end there. I thank you for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you for good questions, Stefan.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're welcome to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as host today. In with me are our show director, May McKillop, Abby Adeyemi, our studio technician and weather specialist. Kevin Nipatebo is producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel today. And Heather Wells is in the newsroom with the CBC Manitoba headlines.
Good morning. Well, don't have to tell you, it is Election Day in the United States. A contest many say is too close to call. We're going to take you to our neighbor to the south, North Dakota, where they are feeling the division of the campaign, and we'll hear from some people there who are voting not only, for the Republicans or for the Democrats, but also the Green Party. That's coming up as well. Manitoba's legal community is feeling the loss of the Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair, who passed away yesterday. We'll hear some memories in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. Well, coming up this morning on Information Radio, with the polarized political climate right now in the United States, it's hard not to feel anxious as we anticipate those election results. We'll hear more from a psychologist about why those big events trigger anxiety and how to manage those feelings. Also, on the U.S. election and Canada, we'll hear from political reporter Ryan Tumulty about how the results of that election could affect politics here in Canada. But up first on Information Radio, we'll hear more about a new hiking trail that's planned for Falcon Lake. Taking a look at the forecast now for Winnipeg today, sunny with a high of 6, clear tonight with increasing cloudiness overnight and a light breeze, low -3. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy with a high of +3. For Brampton today, sunny, a light breeze, high 8, increasing cloudiness early this evening, becoming breezy with a low of 0. For tomorrow, it'll be cloudy conditions, slight chance of showers in the morning, breezy in the afternoon with a high of +4. And for Thompson today, cloudy, slight chance of flurries this morning, light breeze, high of +2. Cloudy tonight with a low of -3. For tomorrow, cloudy, light breeze with a high of -1. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. World Report's next.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
You might remember JoJo shot to the top of the pop charts in the early 2000s with songs like Leave, Get Out, and Too Little Too Late, but then she kind of disappeared. JoJo will be here to tell you where she went and why she's telling her story now in a new memoir. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel-Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Some are calling it one of the closest presidential races in U.S. history. The polls are now open in many states, and over the course of the day, millions of Americans will cast their ballots to elect either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. One of the swing states that could decide this election is Georgia. My World Report co-host John Northcott joins me now from a polling station in Atlanta. And John, what is happening where you are as the polls open?
Marcia, I'm at Buckhead Library, which is one of 45 polling places in Fulton County. About 1 million people live in Fulton County. It's part of Atlanta and a huge voting bloc there in terms of the state overall. I can tell you that people started lining up at this polling place about an hour and a quarter before polls open. Minutes before they open, there were 30 people lined up. There are strict rules around how close you can get as a member of the media. We have to be away from that. And in fact, poll workers were out early this morning, long before dawn, pulling up campaign signs that they say were not allowed within 150 feet of the polling place. So very strict rules in terms of where people can be and what they can be exposed to on their way into the polling places from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. tonight, and then the task of counting the votes.
You attended some rallies last night. What are you hearing from voters?
We went to a Harris-Walz rally, spoke to a number of people there, enthusiasm in the crowd, a lot of energy, and we spoke to a young man, and his name is Hunter Shallis. He's trans, and he knows that in a Donald Trump presidency, he would not receive the care that he says he needs. Have a listen.
The thing is that none of the people I want to vote for are currently on the ballot, but this would lead our country forward rather than backwards. She supports, bringing back abortion rights. She supports, protecting LGBTQ rights.
Now, before we went to that rally, we stopped by and talked to some Trump supporters. A man by the name of Thomas Page. Here is his reasons for why he today will be voting for Donald Trump.
He loves America. He doesn't care about the money because he has his own money anyways. He loves America, and he's going to bring God back into schools. He's bring God back into the United States. And he's all about that because he comes first.
Marcy, we've been here for almost a week, and that division and that passion and that commitment from both sides is being felt with practically everyone we've talked to.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Marcia.
My World Report co-host John Northcott in Atlanta, Georgia. Both presidential campaigns are still working today. They are trying to cement whatever support they can for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. As the results roll in, Trump will be in West Palm Beach, Florida. The CBC's Tom Perry is there. And Tom, how will Donald Trump be spending the day?
Well, Donald Trump was set to arrive back in Florida early this morning, and that was after a final day of campaigning across swing states yesterday. Trump was in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. We expect to see Trump cast his ballot in Palm Beach today, and his campaign is set to hold an election night party at the Palm Beach Convention Center. We drove past there yesterday. Workers were erecting security fences and barriers around the building. Police have said they're preparing for crowds or possible protests. Now, we'll have to wait and see if we hear from Donald Trump tonight, and if we do hear from him, what he might say. In 2020, Trump came out at about 2:30 in the morning before all the votes were counted and claimed he'd already won the election. That turned out to be wrong, though Trump has falsely claimed ever since that election was stolen from him.
You talked about Trump spending his final day of campaigning in swing states. What was his message?
Well, Trump's final campaign rally was last night in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he stuck to his usual themes, strengthening the border, stopping what he calls the invasion of the U.S. by foreign criminals, and he kept up his usual attacks on Kamala Harris, who he called a radical left lunatic. But he also urged his supporters to get out the vote, and he warned them, yet again without proof, that the Democrats are going to try to cheat.
You have to cheat. Who the hell is going to approve that stuff? Who's going to approve open borders with criminals pouring into our country by the millions? No, they have to cheat. But I think we're in very good shape. You show up, and you know what this will be? The single greatest victory, politically speaking, in the history of our country.
So that was Donald Trump last night in Michigan on his last campaign stop, promising his supporters a big win today. We'll see what happens.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
The CBC's Tom Perry in West Palm Beach, Florida. Kamala Harris pulled in more star power during her last night of campaigning. Oprah, Lady Gaga, and Ricky Martin took the stage at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where Harris held her final rally. Harris continued to push her message of unity, saying her campaign will end exactly how it started.
Ours has not been a fight against something. It has been a fight for something. A fight for a future with freedom, with opportunity, and with dignity for all Americans.
Kamala Harris is in Washington, where she will be watching tonight's results at Howard University. The historically black university is Harris's alma mater. Ashley Burke is covering that campaign. We'll hear from her next hour. Israelis will be watching the results of the U.S. vote carefully. CBC's Sasha Petrusik has been asking them who they want to win and how that could influence what happens in the Middle East.
If Israelis could vote in the U.S. election, Republican candidate Donald Trump would likely take Israel.
Donald Trump
did a lot of good things for us, says this man, echoing what a big majority of Israelis tell pollsters. As U.S. president, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Near Tel Aviv's seashore, some have misgivings.
He is unpredictable.
But critically, Trump is seen as supporting Israel's war effort. Democrat Kamala Harris, too soft, they say, too worried about humanitarian issues.
She proved herself against Israel.
Experts say both would likely push Israel harder to end conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon to avoid a bigger war with Iran. But Trump may have more luck persuading Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has so far resisted Washington's pressure for a ceasefire, says Israel's former consul general to New York, Alon Pincus.
Now, if Trump asks him to do that, then he will reach some accommodation and announce a victory. If Kamala Harris does that, he will vie for a direct confrontation.
On the other hand, he says Harris may be more willing to force Israel into a diplomatic solution. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Tonight, tune into America Votes on CBC Radio. It's hosted by Your World Tonight's Susan Bonner and Pia Chattopadhyay of the Sunday Magazine. You can listen on CBC Radio and SiriusXM or stream it live on CBC Listen or the CBC News app. It all begins tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern. Nova Scotians are heading to the polls in 3 weeks, and citizens groups are trying to make wind turbines an election issue. Hundreds of them are proposed for rural communities in Nova Scotia. But as Luke Ettinger tells us, those wind turbines will not power homes. The energy they generate will produce green hydrogen for export.
It's the definition of insanity and utter waste.
Candidates on Gregor Wilson's doorstep can expect some tough questions around the construction of large wind farms. Multiple companies have plans to build hundreds of turbines to produce green hydrogen with the intent to export overseas. The projects would use renewable energy to separate hydrogen from water. Wilson is with Green Nova Scotia First. The citizens group is asking voters to pose questions to candidates about green hydrogen.
Nova Scotia is trying to get off coal and fossil fuels, and all these hydrogen projects stand to slow us down from getting to it.
Fossil fuels make up about half the energy used by Nova Scotians. The province is aiming for 80% renewable energy by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. A spokesperson for Everwind, which has plans to build hundreds of turbines, says the projects are not taking away from those plans. And the PC leader, Tim Houston, says green hydrogen will have a positive impact.
As somebody said to me, we don't catch just enough lobsters for Nova Scotians to eat. We catch lobsters and export them.
Other parties say renewable energy on the grid could help lower electricity prices by getting off coal. That's why Liberal leader Zach Churchill says his party would prioritize those. A sentiment echoed by NDP leader Claudia Chender, who promised to have more to say about green hydrogen in the coming days. Luke Ettinger, CBC News, Halifax.
And on fossil fuels, CBC Analysis has a story showing 3 years of roaring oil prices could be coming to an end. Kyle Bax has that at cbcnews.ca on our main page. It is one of the most read stories this morning. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in today as your host, and here's what's coming up on the show. Trump versus Harris. We'll speak with Ryan Tumulty, a political reporter with the Toronto Star, about what the results of the U.S. election could mean for the Canadian government. And on this election day in the U.S., many are glued to their screens, refreshing their feeds, and feeling anxious about the results. We'll speak with a psychologist about why we feel this way and how to cope with that anxiety. But first, great news for hikers. We'll learn more about a new trail that's planned for Falcon Lake. All that and more coming up on Information Radio. It's -1 and clear right now at the Forks. Heather Wells has the news headlines.
Good morning. Well, on this U.S. election day, one state not thought to be in play is North Dakota. Manitoba's neighbor to the south has been Republican red for decades. 28-year-old Dylan Vukolich is a Republican volunteer in Fargo, and he says Donald Trump's track record for the economy and trade is solid. We're going to hear more from him coming up. The city of Winnipeg is still waiting to recoup a $1 million judgment against former CAO Phil Shiegel. That is according to a spokesperson. A 2022 civil court judgment against Shiegel found he accepted a $327,000 bribe from the contractor who built the Winnipeg Police Headquarters. More on that coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And now, Abby Adeyemi joins us with a look at the weather. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Emily. Did you notice Frosty making his appearance already?
Yes, and you know, when I first stepped out the door this morning, I could hear the sound of people furiously defrosting, scraping their windshields.
You will be scraping if you do surface parking this morning. Just allow yourself some time. Actually, across the province, we're going to see cloudy skies in the north. Plenty of sunshine in the forecast for the southern region with highs reaching 8, but it's going to be feeling chilly this morning, and you will notice the frost as you step outside. Right now, Winnipeg, it is -1. Some areas seeing foggy conditions. Today, we should see plenty of sunshine, light breeze, and then we warm up to highs near 7 degrees today. It will feel chilly as you start your day though, and then the wind chill is going to be making it feel like a -8. The skies will stay clear tonight, and then some clouds will move in after midnight. We then drop to around -3. In other regions, we're looking at the north, seeing cooler temperatures with Churchill experiencing light and blowing snow this morning. Highs for the region, we should be seeing 2 degrees for the north. Currently, Thompson and Churchill near -1 at this time. And down south, we're seeing a sunny day ahead. As mentioned earlier, plenty of sunshine in the forecast. And we'll see highs between 6 and 8 degrees down south. But as mentioned, we will start chilly. Right now, -6 in Brampton, similar condition in Dauphin, and then Gimli, Steinbach, Morris, all hovering between -2 and -3 at this time. Right now, Winnipeg, -1, heading to a high of 6.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. He's also our studio technician. And joining me now in studio is our show director and traffic reporter, May McKillop. Hi, May.
Good morning, Emily. No calls on the commuter line. Well, actually, no, we got one call on the commuter line this morning. Dan on a bike called to let us know that the trails are good and that when you're on a bike, you don't have to scrape windshields.
Yeah, it was a bit slippery out at your place, I hear.
It was a little bit slippery. I was just telling Emily at 4 a.m. when I left my house this morning, I slipped on my deck and fell.
Ouch.
And I'm going to reach out to my landlords and see if I can get the footage because I love a fall video and I want to laugh at myself. So.
Well, and so for people who don't take a fall so well, be careful. It is slippery out there.
The first fall of the season.
The first fall, yes. So there always is one, right?
If anyone wants to give us an update on what they're seeing out there, any tips on how not to fall or how to stay safe on the commute out there, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Quarter after 6, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, and heard around the world on the CBC Listen app and streaming live right now on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass. Well, hikers, we've got some great news for you. Manitoba may soon have a new trail. For the last few years, the South Whiteshell Trail Association has been hard at work creating a trail in Falcon Lake. Kaylee Christie is the association's acting president, and she says they're almost at the project's tail end, but before they start digging, they need a helping hand from Manitobans. She joins us now to share more. Hi, Kaylee.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So tell us more about this trail. Where did the idea to build come from, and where is it going to be?
Okay, yeah, this trail, I mean, it's been a bit of a vision for locals, cottagers, trail users in the area for many, many years. Our trail association is about 30 years old now, and over the last 30 years, we've been building trail, mainly Trans-Canada Trail between the communities of Caddy Lake down through West Hawk, around the west end of Falcon Lake, all along the south shore of Falcon Lake, ending right at the ski hill, Falcon Ridge ski slopes. And so many people over the years have said to us as an organization, hey, right now you're just like one big line on the map. Wouldn't it be cool to make a loop? To continue that trail around the east end of Falcon Lake to connect back with it on the north side, to make a full 38-kilometer circumnavigating loop around the lake. Wouldn't that be neat? And so that's kind of been talked about for many years. And about 4 years ago, our group, we're a charity or nonprofit group, said, volunteer run, let's do this. We'd finished another major project, and we said, what is our next thing? And we said, let's look into this. How is it feasible? What are the costs? Can we get the approvals? Can we get the money? And so that was 4 years ago, and many things have happened. But here we are today. We're breaking ground. So,
oh, wow. Yeah. Well, you got to love a loop trail. It's awesome when you can go all the way without having to turn back. But how far along are you in the creation of the trail? You mentioned that there was already a straight line. Tell us, where are you now?
So this particular project, we broke out into, two construction phases. Prior to construction, though, there was a lot of work to be done just in the research and planning of it. So the first thing we did was we hired landscape architects to put together a feasibility study, and that was all about where would this trail actually go? So walking the route, is it physically feasible? What kind of landscapes is it going to go through? Is there anything that's going to be environmentally sensitive that we need to protect or go around? Are there any historical resources, petroforms or archaeological sites that we need to avoid? So we did that study. Included in that was a full historical resources impact assessment that we subcontracted archaeologists to walk the whole route and make sure that nothing was going to be disturbed. And they did find some stuff which we had to reroute around. After that, it was, and through all this, everything costs money, right? So, and we don't have this project, at that point we hadn't had this project approved, so we couldn't publicly fundraise for it yet. So lots of grant writing, lots of dipping into our own kind of kitty to make sure that we can keep pushing the project along. After that, once we've done all this research, we've done our feasibility study and decided, yes, we want to do this. It was about getting approval from parks, which is no easy feat. Parks are here to serve all Canadians and Manitobans to get out into nature. And so development is not an easy thing, even if it's trail development.
And now you are breaking ground, or?
We are, yeah. So through approval with parks, we did a rigorous, archaeological assessments and consultation with First Nations, which was an amazing process to be a part of. And we're breaking ground, and we're about, of the whole section, a whole trail is about 15 kilometers that we've been developing, and I think we're just over. Well, we're about 75% done construction, actually, of it.
Oh, wow. That's great. And now you're at a point where the association needs a little help. I mean, I guess you've needed financial help all along, but what help do you need right now?
That's right. Yeah, we're really excited now because we can be open and public and about this trail and what we're doing, and we can also at the same time say we need your help. This trail, in the end, will be just over a $500,000 investment once the project is fully done. what we need in this last final push is $115,000. That's been our campaign goal in our recent fundraising campaign, which we're calling Connect the Shores. And I'm really excited to say that we started this fundraising campaign in the summer, and we just passed the halfway mark of that 115,000. So we're another. I can't do the math; it's too early. but we're very close, and we're gaining a lot of momentum, and that's received donations. So we've had a lot of also written and verbal commitments from people that we just haven't received yet. But it's gaining a lot of momentum. We were at on Saturday. We were at an annual film festival event for the Manitoba Association of Trail Runners. They invited us to come out and talk about the project, and there was a lot of donations coming in from that group. They were very excited to hear about this new trail they'd be able to run on, and so we're really excited about it.
And how about, before we let you go, how about the people who are excited to use the trail? Like, what are you hearing from just the regular hikers out there?
Oh, only excitement. People are excited about the potential for doing that full loop, getting out into that east side of Falcon Lake. There's no cottages there. There's a couple, but it's very, very, very. It's a beautiful wilderness zone, high rocky ridges, stunning views of Falcon Lake like you've never seen before. It's very high elevation. The trail is going to be really neat. It's going to be rugged. It's going to be lots of ups and downs. So people are excited about the potential to get into that relatively close wilderness zone, to exercise on the trail, to train on the trail, maybe participate in an event on the trail.
So many exciting possibilities. Sounds gorgeous. I can't wait to check it out. And just in the last 10 seconds here, Kaylee, how can people donate?
Yeah, so to make a donation, don't forget we're a charity, so we can give you a tax-deductible receipt. You can head to our website. It is swtatrails.com, or just Google Connect the Shores Trail Project, and it should come up. And we have an online link there you can click to donate. You can donate online. You can do e-transfer. Bank transfer, I think, is also good, or check, whatever works for you. Even just get in touch with us to ask more questions. There's also lots of information about donor recognition levels.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. We really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and have a great day.
Kaylee Christie is acting president of the South Whiteshell Trail Association.
For breaking news as it happens, stay with CBC News. For the latest updates and what it means for Canadians, stay with CBC News. When the biggest stories break, both at home and around the world, stay with CBC News.
Good morning. It's 6:23. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1 on this frosty morning in Winnipeg. It's -1 and clear right now at the Forks. I'm Emily Brass. As Americans head to the polls today, people on both sides of the border are waiting for the results. Some might be feeling anxious, as the uncertainty can weigh heavily on our minds. For some tips on managing anxiety during these tense times, we've reached registered psychologist Janine Hubbard. Hello, Janine.
Good morning. I know I'm feeling the anxiety. How about yourself?
Well, there's so much uncertainty, because it's so unclear, there's no obvious winner at this point. That can make people probably feel pretty anxious. Why do you think there are, people are feeling anxious around, big events like elections?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is uncertainty, and in particular, uncertainty around something that we have no control over is likely to escalate anxiety because we know we like to manage things, and what is unpredictable makes us feel anxious. It sometimes makes us feel kind of helpless. The other thing is, as we've seen in this election, like many others, it's been very polarizing. And what happens is that's great in terms of engagement in politics and hopefully getting people out to vote. Because if you're not very invested in the outcome, you might not get terribly involved. You might not bother. But the problem when things get very polarized is that we start engaging in this all or nothing thinking that, well, if the party I support doesn't win, the world is going to end tomorrow. It's going to be catastrophic, as opposed to being able to take it in a bit more of a measured response and say, okay, Things might not everything's going to go the way that I'm hoping, but the world is not going to end. We do cope in much more nuanced situations. And reminding yourself of some of that is one of the ways that you can start to cope with that anxiety.
Yeah, and that black and white thinking that you touched on. Mm-hmm. How can people recognize maybe, when they get to a point where their anxieties become overwhelming?
Well, we expect it today and tomorrow. There's some short-term coping strategies that we can look at, but it's a question of, as news kind of passes along, as we're a couple of days out of the election, are you able to resume your normal activities, your normal coping strategies, or is it still something that's really preoccupying your thoughts? Short-term for today, couple of pieces of advice. Give yourself a bedtime. You're not going to know the results until tomorrow sometime, and staying up late or checking the news in the middle of the night. I might have done that myself in a previous U.S. election. Not a great idea, because you will then be sleep deprived and anxious and stressed. And the other piece is, be really mindful of your social media usage. And in particular, how much you're posting or commenting or saying anything over the next day or two. Remember that those comments made in the heat of the moment with heightened emotions may come back to haunt you a little bit. So really think more than twice or three times, is it really something I need to post? Can I sleep on it?
Yeah. And we've been hearing some people, already experiencing these high level of anxiety for quite a while now. What are some healthy ways to cope with anxiety during times of uncertainty?
Well, one of the biggest things is looking at your perspective taking, looking and going, okay, I know this has dominated the news cycle in all kinds of ways, and it's been a bit of a circus, so it's been really easy to get sucked into it. But reminding yourself, how much does this actually impact myself and my loved ones on a daily basis? Kind of taking that step back and going, okay, yes, there's going to be some impact, but really and truly, I still need to do the laundry. I still need to go to work. I still need to be able to focus and concentrate. So engaging in some active distraction, especially today. Today is not the day to debate politics with someone whose viewpoint you don't agree with. It's just going to escalate emotions, and it's not going to solve anything. So either having conversations where you agree not to talk about politics, or going for a walk, getting some, I know it's cold out there, but getting some fresh air, getting some exercise, putting on a silly movie tonight instead of watching the news, whatever you can do to kind of help give yourself some perspective and some distance, and be very mindful about your media usage and your social media exposure.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you're saying that taking breaks from the news is a really good thing, even during these tense moments. But are there any signs that maybe indicate it's time to get professional help for your anxiety?
Well, and sometimes there's been low-level anxiety, or even it's been pretty high for a while, but then something like this event kind of puts you over the edge. And so you want to really reevaluate over the next week or so, and kind of going, okay, have I been able to gain perspective? Am I sleeping well? Am I engaging in good coping strategies? Or is this continuing to preoccupy my thoughts, cause me to feel distracted, difficulty focusing, and difficulty moving on, or having really disproportionate reactions to things? That might be a sign of, you know what, I've kind of been ignoring all those warning signs, that my anxiety was getting higher than I was comfortable with, because some anxiety around this, totally normal. Absolutely want to validate that in people. But if it's feeling like it's interfering with daily life, that's your big signal that maybe it's time to seek some help.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's really great to know. Thank you so much for joining us, Janine.
Oh, anytime. Thank you, everybody. And we're going to get through this one way or the other.
Yes, it'll all be over soon. Thank you, Janine.
Okay, take care.
Janine Hubbard is a registered psychologist. Well, still to come on this hour of the show, the U.S. election, more on that, and how the results of that election could affect politics in Canada. We'll hear from political reporter Ryan Tumulty. Still pretty slow out there on the commuter line. If you see anything happening out on the roads, please give us a call, 204-788-3093. The news is next.
'Good morning. 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 'Good mor This is CBC News. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30 -1. Don't worry about the frosty start. We are going to warm back up above seasonal today, sunny with a high of 6. After a long, divisive campaign, today is Election Day in the United States.
We are ready for a president who knows that the true measure of a leader is not based on who you beat down, but based on who you lift up.
Her final speech of the campaign, Kamala Harris, last night in Philadelphia. Her opponent, Donald Trump, giving his final address in Grand Rapids, Michigan, promising if Mexico and Canada don't stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S., he'll slap punitive tariffs on both countries.
Whether it's Mexico or Canada or wherever, because they're starting now in Canada, they're starting to go up north. But whether it's Mexico or Canada, we're going to explain to them quickly that if you allow fentanyl and these drugs to come through your country, we're going to charge you large-scale tariffs on everything you send into the United States.
Last week, the Mounties announced a massive drug bust in BC. They say they discovered the largest and most sophisticated drug super lab in Canada. Now, Manitoba's neighbor to the south is not a swing state. North Dakota has been Republican-red for decades. 28-year-old Dylan Vukolich is a Republican volunteer in Fargo. He says his ball cap with the phrase Trump Force Captain in gold lettering gets a lot of compliments. Vukolich says any critics of Donald Trump's rhetoric should take note of his track record.
If anyone has any concerns, I'd just to say to look at the person. And look at all the great things he's done as president. No new wars, and helping get the economy up. Great trade agreement.
A political scientist in North Dakota says while most Republican supporters seem to be keeping their opinions to themselves during this campaign, North Dakota will likely stay red. Now, CBC Radio will have live coverage of the U.S. election tonight with up-to-the-minute results, analysts from a Canadian perspective, and correspondents in every swing state. Listen to America Votes on CBC Radio starting at 7 tonight Central Time. You can hear more on today's election in the U.S. as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Manitoba's legal community is feeling the loss of Murray Sinclair. Among his many groundbreaking roles, Sinclair was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge. Brad Regier was a law student when he first met Sinclair in the early 1990s. He says Sinclair has been a fixture over his 27-year career.
I'm pretty confident that I can say that there's not a single Indigenous judge or lawyer or law student who doesn't know of the legacy of Murray Sinclair.
Regier was the first Indigenous president of the Canadian Bar Association. Sinclair led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, examining the history of Canada's residential school system. He was later appointed an independent senator. Murray Sinclair died yesterday at the age of 73. You can read more about his legacy on our website this morning, cbc.ca/Manitoba. The city of Winnipeg has collected none of the millions of dollars it is owed as the result of lawsuits against the builder of the Winnipeg Police Service headquarters. The city quietly placed a $28 million mortgage on at least 5 properties associated with Caspian projects this past April. The move came 1 year after City Council voted to settle with Caspian over lawsuits alleging fraud, secret commissions, and construction deficiencies. Caspian's lawyer did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Almost 300 volunteers are gearing up to survey Winnipeg's homeless population. The street census tallies the estimated number of unhoused people in this city and identifies trends in their pathway to homelessness. The data is drawn from local shelters as well as through in-person surveys with people on the streets. Elijah Osei-Yaboa is with the End Homelessness Winnipeg.
It helps us to better understand the needs of those experiencing homelessness so we can improve service delivery. It helps us to advocate for more resources. If we know the trends, then you could formulate measures to be able to address any negative emerging trends.
The survey gets underway tomorrow and it runs until Saturday. You can find more news updated throughout your day. Today, all you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I think a lot of people are going to be checking the news today, Heather.
I think a lot of people glued to any kind of news source.
Yes, absolutely. And we got you covered here at CBC all day long. Thank you so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells joining us from the Manitoba newsroom. It is 6:35 right now. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. And it's time now for a look at the forecast with Abby Adeyemi. One of the only things maybe not affected by the U.S. election today is the weather.
Yeah, I guess they're also gonna have a good weather in most of the states to go out and vote. So the weather is also gonna be flowing in that direction.
We can't get away from it today.
We can't get away from it. Just looking at the regions now, up north we're gonna be seeing light snow in that region, and down south it's gonna be more of like sunshine and highs getting close to 8 degrees. Winnipeg currently fog reported in some areas. The airport also seeing foggy conditions at this time. But downtown it is clear, -1 we're seeing. We should see plenty of sunshine with light breeze today. Our highs would get close to 7 degrees, but the stat here says 6 degrees, but it might get to 7. This morning might be feeling chilly for a lot of people because of the wind chill factored in. It feels closer to -8, so you might want to bundle and prepare accordingly as you step out today. And then for tonight, we'll see the skies will stay clear and some clouds will roll in, and then we drop to about -3. With the wind chill factored in, it's going to feel like -7. Heading west to Brampton, -6 at this time. It's clear also out there. The forecast for today, we're looking at sunny condition with a high of 8, but it will feel a bit chilly this morning, and you should expect some light winds throughout the day. Thompson is at 0 this time. We're seeing some cloudy conditions. Today will stay cloudy for that region. There is a chance of light snow, and you only get to a high of 2 degrees today, though it's going to feel like -5 as you start your day. Now, further north in Churchill, -1. We're seeing this light blowing snow off and on. This will stay with you for most of the day, and this snow is going to be bringing about 2 centimeters of accumulation once the system passes, and it will become breezy with temperatures dropping to around -3. With the wind chill factored in for folks out there, it's going to be feeling as cold as -12 when we get to the afternoon period for folks in Churchill, so brace for that. Down in Dauphin, -5 and clear. Today's forecast is for a mainly sunny sky. With light breeze in the forecast. Highs will be getting to 5 degrees. Gimli currently at -3 and clear. The forecast for the Interlake region calls for plenty of sunshine and highs near 6 degrees. Steinbach at -2, heading to a high of 6. And Morris at -1. It's clear out there. The forecast for the Pembina Valley region calls for plenty of sunshine, light breeze with a high close to 6 degrees, similar to what we're seeing Gimli, Steinbach. And just lots of sunshine in the south for today, with highs getting close to 8 degrees in most of the regions. Right now, Winnipeg, chilly, -1.
Yeah, and kind of frosty out there.
Frosty. So you might want to do some scraping. Allow yourself time. You'll definitely be scraping this morning.
You will be. The second I stepped outside, I heard people busy scraping their windshields. So that's good advice. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
And then, of course, someone else who's been dealing with the frostiness this morning, May McKillop, had a little bit of a wipeout this morning.
Yes, to our listeners who didn't hear in the last half hour, I fell this morning on my way out. And I'm the type of person who finds humor in those moments. I wasn't injured, so I could kind of giggle at myself and say, well, that's what happens.
But it is that like first moment of the year where, it's like, hey, it's real now. I slipped on some frost.
It is. Did Abby say the first fall of the year? This is it?
Yes, that's it. It's official. So what's going on out on those slippery roads?
Well, we got our first call from Dave from the balcony, who calls often. First call of the winter, I should say. He called to say that there's a collision on eastbound Chief Peguis on the bridge. Emergency crews are on site, but unfortunately it's backed up eastbound Chief Peguis from the bridge all the way to Maine. So there may be some delays in that area. If anyone wants to give me an update, I would love to hear about it. And to the commuter who just called the commuter line, I'm sorry that we didn't pick up. I was in here. So if you want to call us back, I can answer your phone call in a minute. give us a call, 204-788-3093.
Call back. We want to know what you wanted to share. Thank you so much, May. That's CBC's May McKillop. She's also our show director. And also on our crew this morning is Kevin Nipatebo, who's producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel stream right now. Well, it's 6:40, time for business news. Crystalie Ramlakan joins us with the CBC Business Report. Good morning, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Emily.
So the federal government has unveiled draft regulations to cap greenhouse gas emissions in the oil and gas sector by at least 35% below 2019 levels. That's pretty dramatic. What are the details we know so far?
Yeah, so the sector is responsible for almost a third of the country's greenhouse gas emissions. And so it would have 4 years to phase in these reductions under these rules. Now, the federal government doesn't expect a major dent in the industry. Because of this, it expects the sector will still be able to increase production by 16% above 2019 levels by 2032. And if oil and gas facilities cut their emissions faster, they will be able to sell their excess permits through a trading system to other companies. And of course, the goal here is to reach net zero by 2050. Now, producers can also meet 20% of their targets by purchasing offsets or by contributing to a decarbonization fund. And the government says oil and gas companies have seen a tenfold increase in profits since 2019 and says companies are not spending enough to reduce their carbon footprints. Now, the Pathways Alliance, that's a consortium of Canada's largest oil sands companies, has said existing climate policies are encouraging the right behaviors and calls the move unnecessary. It says the cap will likely have the unintended effect of making operators shut in Canadian production. But Andrew Leach has a bit of a different perspective. He's an energy and environmental economist at the University of Alberta.
I think what you're going to see is a lot of companies that say, we're going to reevaluate expansions, but our existing production is sufficiently valuable that it makes sense to invest in the technology to abate the emissions. The same way as, if somebody said, I've lost my parking pass, I wouldn't quit my job.
Now, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith claims the cap would result in a significant cut to oil production, leading to economic decline. And she says the province will explore every legal option to try to fight this cap. Now, the federal environment minister says the government would be willing to negotiate an agreement with any province if it wants to develop its own regulations that would be equivalent to the federal ones to try to drive down emissions. And Emily, these regulations will be published on November 9th and will be open for consultation until January 8th. And the final recommendations and regulations are expected to be published in the spring.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. And moving now to labor news, you have the latest on the strike at Boeing.
Yes, so machinists have approved a new labor deal after a 7-week strike that halted most of the aircraft production at the company that was already struggling with mounting losses. So they voted 59% in favor of the new contract, which includes a 38% wage increase over 4 years and some other improvements. And machinist pay will now average just over $119,000 at the end of this contract proposal. Now, this really is a relief for the new CEO who took over the job in just August to try to steer the company through its safety and manufacturing crisis. And Boeing will now be able to resume production, which is going to be key to its recovery since customers pay most of their bill when aircraft are delivered and handed over. Now, the company is one of the U.S.'s top exporters, and this was the third vote since September with when 33,000 workers, mostly in the Seattle area, walked off the job. Workers had been complaining about the skyrocketing cost of living. So workers must return to their jobs no later than November 12th now, and they could return as early as tomorrow.
Okay. And then speaking of the U.S., the election day is everywhere. It's even in the business report today. How are some companies using the election day to promote themselves?
Yeah, well, they're launching deals and giving out freebies. Of course, it is illegal to reward people for voting or paying people to register to vote, but these are perks and promotions and discounts. So Uber and Lyft are offering half off of trips to polls, up to $10. Uber Eats is offering a quarter off of orders tonight. Krispy Kreme is giving away donuts in honor of what it calls democracy. Oh. Of course, no proof of voting is necessary to get that treat. And IKEA is offering a free frozen yogurt.
Wow, it's practically a holiday. So what's happening in the market so far? Any celebrating there, Crystal Lee?
Well, in Europe, markets are inching higher as traders focus on the U.S. election day. Germany, the U.K., and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mixed right now, but right now, Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all up. Oil is up at 50 cents to $71.97 U.S. per barrel. Gold is up $2.90 to $2,739 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is up almost a tenth of a cent to 72 cents U.S.
Thank you, Crystal Lee.
Okay, thanks, Emily.
That was Crystal Lee Ramlakan with the CBC Business News. It's 6:46. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, around the world on the CBC Listen app, as well as on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, where we're streaming live right now. I'm Emily Brass. In every high school movie, there's always a scene of the unpopular kid eating alone in the cafeteria. Well, that kid eating alone is now cool. The script has been flipped, and restaurants are setting more tables for one. Here's CBC's Alice Cho.
A couple of years ago, Kyle Prescott was traveling a lot for work. He was sick of eating fast food. So he took the plunge and went out to a nice restaurant by himself.
Like anything you do for the first time, it was a little scary to say, am I being judged, or they're going to ask me questions?
But he got over it. And these days, he goes out to eat alone, at least once a week.
Hi, table for one under Kyle? Sure, you can follow me. Thank you.
Lunches, dinners. He even booked a table for one at a Michelin-starred restaurant.
I think I ended up doing 6 dishes. Yeah, made sure I was hungry. 6 dishes for myself. So there is a bit of that, treat yourself.
In the past 6 months, more than 40% of Canadians say they've dined alone in a restaurant. At the same time, reservations for one have also gone up.
I'm not surprised. I think
Bruce McAdams teaches at the School of Hospitality, Food and Tourism at the University of Guelph. He says younger generations are all about me time.
So that might mean, you know what, I'm alone tonight instead of sitting down and having a frozen dinner in front of the TV. I'm going to treat myself and go out and go to a nice restaurant.
More Canadians are living alone than ever before. And Bruce says people are more comfortable being alone. And restaurants, they're paying attention. Some are welcoming single diners with a glass of bubbly. Others are offering them a front row seat to watch the chef in action. The days when you'd be seated in the back next to the swinging door are over.
The willingness for chefs, for owners and servers to say, we'll accommodate you, and if you want a single size of this, we can do this for you. We're just really glad you're with us tonight.
Bruce says times are tough for restaurants right now. Revenues are still 10% lower than they were 5 years ago. And according to Open Table, people who eat alone spend 43% more than the average diner.
So right now, I think people are willing to cater to single diners more. They're looking at it as a new and emerging market, or a market that maybe they haven't tried to capitalize on before.
But not everyone thinks the trend is all good news.
I think it could be a good news story or a bad news story, depending on what the reason is. And it's probably a little bit of both.
Cindy Chan is a marketing professor at the University of Toronto who specializes in consumer psychology. She says there's a loneliness epidemic out there. Solo dining could be a reflection of that.
If it's a signal that people have fewer social connections and are resorting to having to dine alone unwillingly, then that's not great, right?
But on the other hand,
anytime you can get people out of their homes, and even if you're not dining with others, you are interacting with others, you're in a social environment, you are engaging in an activity that can offer enjoyment and pleasure.
Well, for more stories about how money shapes our lives in ways big and small, you can check out the Cost of Living podcast or catch the show on CBC Radio 1 Tuesday mornings at 11:30 and noon on Sundays. 10 minutes before 7 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Well, as we've been hearing just about everywhere, it's Election Day in the U.S., and while it could take days until we have final results, there's no denying the winner of this election will have an impact on Canada and the Canadian government. For a closer look, we've reached Ryan Tumulty, a political reporter with the Toronto Star. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning.
So what are some of the ways you think the results of this election could affect Canada and Canadians?
Yeah, I mean, it's just an enormous relationship. You're talking about the trade file. It's billions of dollars a day going back and forth. It's such a huge component of so many industries in Canada and the U.S. for that matter. So that's a big issue. Our militaries, Canadian and U.S. soldiers are serving side by side at places like NORAD. And then, lots of just people to people ties, right? Millions of people who make the trip across the border every year, who family in the U.S. and vice versa. So, it's a big relationship. They are the bigger player in the relationship. So anything they do is going to have a big impact here.
Yeah, and of course, a big impact on our elected officials. What will be the biggest challenges for the Canadian government if Trump is elected?
If Trump is elected, I think unpredictability is what I think mostly Canadian officials worry about. This is something when he was in office, they found that they were constantly being caught off guard, constantly being surprised by what he had to say or what he was doing on a given day. The trade file is going to be enormous. He has talked about a 10% tariff on all goods entering the U.S. So, if you think about how much of our economy is geared towards shipping things to the U.S., that would have a big impact on lots and lots of Canadian businesses. So, yeah, it's going to be huge. If he's elected, it will be lots for the Trudeau government to sort of parse through.
And will there be opportunities for the Canadian government if President Trump lands back in office?
Yeah, I think one thing certainly that could be an opportunity is that Donald Trump has been a bigger backer of Canada's oil and gas industry than most U.S. presidents. He was a big advocate for the Keystone Pipeline, for example. So, that is a potential there, but it's sort of hard to see how that all plays out and whether or not maybe that project has moved past it and won't happen at all under any president.
And then shifting over to Kamala Harris, if she's elected president, what types of challenges do you anticipate there?
On some level, it's similar challenges, much more predictable, obviously. She is a politician that I think the Canadian government better understands. But, she has also got a bit of a protectionist bent. The Biden administration brought in this Inflation Reduction Act. It was one of their signature pieces of legislation. And it carried these huge incentives to bring companies to America. And if you think about, down in Windsor, Ontario, we have the Stellantis plant and also the Volkswagen plant. The federal government put up billions of dollars to attract those plants. Largely because they had to. They had to match those American incentives if they wanted those jobs. So, I think probably secretly, quietly, the government's hoping for a Harris win. But that doesn't mean they think that it'll be easy.
And then what about the opportunities for the Canadian government if Harris wins?
I think they are probably better politically aligned with a Harris government. And I think, you can't say enough how much that predictability aspect is important to them, that they will know what is happening day to day, that they will have a reasonable guess as to what a President Harris might do. I think that's a big factor for them.
And what can you tell us about how Ottawa is preparing for both of those scenarios?
Yeah, Ottawa's got a long-standing approach to this, and it kind of transcends parties and governments. It was going on during the Harper years as much as the Trudeau years. And that is really just about building a really big tent in the U.S. of Canada backers. So, lots of countries obviously reach out to the U.S. president and his inner circle and try to make their case for their country. But Canada goes way further, meeting with senators, meeting with congressmen, meeting with governors. Anytime the prime minister is in the U.S., he often meets with the president, but he'll often be meeting with governors. He'll be meeting with the heads of the Senate and on both parties. So it's just this long-standing approach of trying to get as many politicians, business leaders, other community leaders to be advocates for Canada. And that's how they sort of make sure that, there's always someone in the room advocating for Canada.
And just in our last 30 seconds here, Ryan, along with the U.S. election results, what else are you going to watch for this week in Parliament?
Yeah, yesterday the government unveiled its emissions cap on the oil sands, the oil and gas industry broadly. Lots of pushback from that already, and I suspect that'll continue this week. So I think it'll be interesting to follow that file.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks so much for joining us, Ryan.
No problem. Take care.
Ryan Tumulty is a political reporter with the Toronto Star. And standing by now with the CBC News headlines is Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, as we follow this election day in the United States, we're going to head to North Dakota, Manitoba's neighbors to the south, where they are feeling some of the division. Phil Hall lives in Pembina. He and his wife are proud Democrats in a predominantly Republican town. We're going to hear from him coming up. As well, a street census tallying Winnipeg's homeless population gets underway this week. Almost 300 volunteers are going to survey people experiencing homelessness. They're also going to collect data from agencies working with them. And Homelessness Winnipeg says this data is vital to understanding the needs of the unhoused and to advocate for more resources. We'll hear more on those stories coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. Well, still to come in Information Radio. It didn't take long for our CBC Manitoba colleagues down in North Dakota to find 3 Americans making very different decisions about the future of their country today. Stay tuned. We'll take you down to the town of Grafton to hear more. That's where Marcy Marcusa and Corey Funk spoke with people yesterday. We're also going to speak with CBC's John Northcott, who's in the battleground state of Georgia. And much later in the show, we're going to speak with Manitoba Chief Justice Glenn Joyal about the late Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair's impact on our province's legal system. Of course, he passed away yesterday. Well, looking at the weather really quickly here this morning. Right now, it's -1 and clear at the Forks in Winnipeg today. Sunny with a high of 6. Clear tonight with increasing cloudiness overnight and a low of -3. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy with a high of +3. In Thompson today, cloudy with a slight chance of flurries this morning, high +2. Cloudy tonight with a low of -3. And for tomorrow, cloudy with a high of -1. And for Brandon, sunny today with a high of 8. Increasing cloudiness early this evening and becoming breezy with a low of 0. For tomorrow, cloudy with a 30% chance of showers in the morning. Then it's going to become breezy from the northwest in the afternoon with a high of +4. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg. You can also check us out streaming live right now on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, and wherever you might be at any time, you can always tune in on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. World Report is next.
Today on The Current.
Donald Trump intends to take America backward.
She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat.
Well, after months of anticipation, it's finally Election Day in the United States, and we'll hear from voters about what this day means for them in a country that is very divided at a time where many important issues are on the ballot. It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Millions of voters across the United States are now heading to the polls to choose their next president. It was a busy day for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump yesterday. The two candidates made their final push for votes during several campaign stops. Now this election is down to the voters and whether either candidate has been able to resonate with their vision for America. The CBC's Ashley Burke joins me from Washington, D.C. And Ashley, when it comes to Kamala Harris, what does the path to victory look like?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign says they have multiple paths to hit 270 electoral votes, which is what they need to win. But their most direct way would be to claim victory over what they call the blue wall states, which are three battlegrounds: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Harris was there last night in Philadelphia and expressed optimism she could win, but she also said it could be one of the closest races in history. And in her closing message, she continued to drop former President Donald Trump's name from her stump speech. And she told voters she was offering them a clean break from the Trump era of politics that she says is driven by division and fear.
America is ready for a fresh start, ready for a new way forward where we see our fellow American not as an enemy, but as a neighbor.
What is Kamala Harris doing today?
Harris is going to be here in Washington today. Her campaign says she'll be doing a series of interviews and that they are trying to reach as many people as possible so that they hear her vision. Now, her campaign has also set up a stage, stands, a jumbotron at Howard University, where we expect to hear her speak at some point. It's her alma mater, one of the U.S.'s historically Black colleges and universities, and where she's hoping to make history as the first graduate of one of these schools to become president. I've been on campus talking to students there who are first-time voters, and here's what Savannah McDonald and Haley Beckwith told me about the significance of this.
If you just go back 40 years, we were fighting for our civil rights, so the fact that a woman of color could be the first female president of the United States, it's just really exciting to see.
Just hearing her speak and her voice and her being from Howard, it's such an emotional time for me.
They also said they're feeling nervous about their safety if Trump doesn't get the results he wants.
All right. Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ashley Burke in Washington, D.C. A Republican candidate, Donald Trump, is in Florida today. He will be taking in tonight's results in West Palm Beach. That is where we find the CBC's Tom Perry. And Tom, how will Donald Trump be spending the day?
Well, Donald Trump was set to arrive back in Florida early this morning, and that was after a final day of campaigning across swing states yesterday. Trump was in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. We expect to see Trump cast his ballot in Palm Beach today, and his campaign is set to hold an election night party at the Palm Beach Convention Center. We drove past there yesterday. Workers were erecting security fences and barriers around the building. Police have said they're preparing for crowds or possible protests. Now, we'll have to wait and see if we hear from Donald Trump tonight, and if we do hear from him, what he might say. In 2020, Trump came out at about 2:30 in the morning before all the votes were counted and claimed he'd already won the election. That turned out to be wrong, though Trump has falsely claimed ever since that that election was stolen from him.
You talked about Trump spending his final day of campaigning in swing states. What was his message?
Well, Trump's final campaign rally was last night in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he stuck to his usual themes, strengthening the border, stopping what he calls the invasion of the U.S. by foreign criminals, and he kept up his usual attacks on Kamala Harris, who he called a radical left lunatic. But he also urged his supporters to get out the vote, and he warned them, yet again without proof, that the Democrats are going to try to cheat.
You have to cheat. Who the hell is going to approve that stuff? Who's going to approve open borders with criminals pouring into our country by the millions? No, they have to cheat. But I think we're in very good shape. You show up, and you know what this will be? The single greatest victory, politically speaking, in the history of our country.
So that was Donald Trump last night in Michigan on his last campaign stop, promising his supporters a big win today. We'll see what happens.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
The CBC's Tom Perry in West Palm Beach, Florida. Tonight, tune in to America Votes on CBC Radio. It's hosted by Your World Tonight, Susan Bonner and Pia Chattopadhyay of the Sunday Magazine. Expect lively conversation with special guests and CBC reporters in the field offering analysis from a Canadian perspective. You can listen on CBC Radio and Sirius XM or stream it live on CBC Listen or the CBC News app. It all begins tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central. And join us again tomorrow morning for the latest results and reaction. Police in Brampton, Ontario say they broke up another protest outside a Hindu temple overnight. Hundreds of demonstrators and counter-protesters showed up outside the temple. It had been the site of a protest just the night before. Police say some demonstrators were observed carrying weapons. At that point, it became an unlawful assembly. The crowd was dispersed, but events like this one are drawing criticism from the Indian government. Salima Shivji has that part of the story from Mumbai.
A small protest in the northern Indian city of Chandigarh. A Hindu group angry that there was violence some 11,000 kilometers away, outside a temple in Brampton, Ontario. We won't tolerate any act of violence against Hindus or our temples, this woman says. Police in Ontario arrested 3 people after clashes broke out on Sunday outside a Hindu temple while Indian consular officials were inside. Videos posted to social media show fistfights and other scuffles between some demonstrators holding banners in support of an independent Sikh state and others holding India's flag.
It was obviously deeply concerning.
India's Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar also pointed to a tweet from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. A deliberate attack, Modi wrote, denouncing what he calls appalling, cowardly attempts to intimidate India's diplomats. The clashes come as diplomatic ties are at an all-time low between the two countries over allegations Indian diplomats were involved in a campaign of extortion and murder targeting pro-Khalistani activists in Canada. Jaishankar again dismissed those claims outright.
Canada has developed a pattern of making allegations without providing specifics. Secondly, the fact that they're putting our diplomats under surveillance is something which is unacceptable.
He also says India is firm in its belief that Canada has given political space to extremist forces. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
Today is day 2 of a lockout at ports in British Columbia, including the busy port of Vancouver. Corey Redekop is CEO of the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce. He says this will affect businesses trying to move goods in and out of BC.
I've got members who have goods coming over for the holidays and they're not sure when they're going to arrive and hit store shelves. That's really concerning.
The union and the BC Maritime Employers Association have been stuck in a contract dispute for nearly 2 years. The union says locking out 730 workers is an overreaction, but their employers say it was already seeing industry-wide strike action at terminals. Pierre Poilievre's call for premiers to cut provincial sales tax on new homes is getting a lukewarm response. So far, no province has committed to moving ahead with the tax cut. It could be costly, and as Kate McKenna reports, at least one province says it could be ineffective.
I'm interested in lower taxes. I'm interested in more housing.
Nova Scotia Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston, in the middle of an election campaign, says he's open to cutting provincial sales taxes on new homes, but won't make it a promise for now.
I'm happy to have a discussion about that. It's not something I can commit to today.
Canada's premiers, including Houston, who is running for re-election, received a letter from Pierre Poilievre. The Conservative leader is asking provinces to cut provincial sales taxes on new homes under $1 million to match his promise to cut the GST. Poilievre says his plan would make it easier to buy a home. But CBC News asked provinces that have sales tax on new homes, including Ontario, Quebec, PEI, and Saskatchewan, and they won't commit, with some saying the idea needs more study. Quebec's finance minister has said it would be costly and may not lead to more homes being built.
It's reckless. It's really bad.
Meanwhile, federal Liberals like Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault say Poilievre's plan to axe some federal housing programs to pay for the tax cut is misguided.
We went and said to the municipalities, speed up your zoning, get rid of red tape, and we'll give you more money to get houses built more quickly.
Poilievre calls those programs bureaucratic and ineffective, but the federal government says billions of dollars have already been committed to communities, and cutting the programs would only hurt them. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in today as host. Here's what's coming up on this hour of the show. End Homelessness Winnipeg is kicking off its street census today to try to track the number of people who don't have a home and to take note of the challenges they face in our city. We'll speak with one of the organizers. A voter from East Grand Forks, Minnesota, says she cast her ballot for Kamala Harris and applied for an expedited passport last week just in case Donald Trump wins. We'll hear why she would seriously consider moving to Winnipeg. And on this election day in the United States, we'll go to the swing state of Georgia, where CBC's John Northcott joins us from Atlanta. All that coming up on Information Radio. -1 and clear at the Forks. It's 11 minutes after 7 o'clock. Heather Wells has the CBC News headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's legal community is feeling the loss of Murray Sinclair. Among his many groundbreaking roles, Sinclair was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge. Brad Regier was a law student when he met Sinclair back in the early 1990s. He says there isn't a single Indigenous judge or lawyer or law student who doesn't know the legacy of Murray Sinclair. Sinclair died yesterday. We'll hear more from Brad Regier coming up. As well, the city of Winnipeg is still waiting to recoup a $1 million judgment against former CAO Phil Schiegel, that's according to a spokesperson. A 2022 civil court judgment against Phil Schiegel found he accepted a $327,000 bribe from the contractor who built the Winnipeg Police Headquarters. Those stories and more coming up in our next news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells joining us from the Manitoba newsroom. And joining us from the other side of the glass is our studio technician and weather specialist, Abby Adiemi. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Em. We're looking at cloudy skies and light snow in the north and plenty of sunshine in the forecast for the south. We'll see highs close to 8 degrees today, but it's a chilly start, so you may want to brace for that. Right now, Winnipeg, -1, sunny skies in the forecast. Light breeze also will come with that. We get to a high of 6 degrees. With the wind chill factored in, it's going to feel closer to -8 this morning. And then tonight, we see some clear start, but the clouds will crawl in as we get closer to the overnight time, and then temperatures drops to around -3. Though with the wind chill factored in, it's going to feel like -7 with light breeze. In other regions, the north will be seeing cooler temperatures as mentioned. Churchill currently experiencing light blowing snow at this time, and highs for that region 2 degrees. Thompson and Churchill hovering near -1 at this time, and light snow in the forecast as mentioned. Down south, sunny day ahead, plenty of sunshine. Highs between 6 and 8, though chilly stat. Right now, -6 in Brandon, -2 for Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbeck, and Morris. That's what it looks like, but we do warm up later, and we'll see highs close to that 8 degrees. Right now, Winnipeg, -1 and chilly.
Yeah, so even though it's going to go up to 8 today, bundle up because it is cold out there right now.
It's still a chilly start before it gets sunny.
And you need those gloves to scrape the windshield if you're driving out there. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Abby Adiemi. And also on the other side of the glass is Kevin Nipatebo, who is streaming us live right now on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And joining me now here in the studio is our show director and traffic reporter, May McKillop. Good morning.
Hi, Emily. I wanted to let our listeners know that that the collision and delays on eastbound Chief Peguis on the bridge there have cleared, although we're seeing some delays on another bridge. This is westbound South Perimeter on the Red River Bridge. There's emergency crews on site. I'm not exactly sure what is happening there right now, but we know that there are crews on site that are causing delays, and the caller that called that in said that traffic is stopped on westbound South Perimeter. If anyone has any updates of that area or anyone else they want to let me know, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Coming up on 7:15, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg. Also heard around the world on the CBC Listen app. And you can check us out on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. Well, many will be watching the state of Georgia as Americans vote for their next president today. Georgia's considered a swing state, so many eyes will be glued to the results as they come in. CBC's John Northcott has been in Georgia since last week, and today he's in Atlanta. He joins us now. Hi, John.
Good morning, Emily. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. How about you down in Georgia? Maybe start with telling us why it's such a key battleground down there.
Sure. Well, first I'll tell you we're at a polling place here in Fulton County at the Buckhead Library, and we've been here since well before dawn. And in fact, key voters were here well before dawn, lining up, wanting to go in when it opens at 7 o'clock Eastern, and they're in there now voting, and the polls will be open here until 7 p.m. tonight. When we were putting together our plan to come down here, of course, CBC has assets throughout the swing states in the United States, and we're bringing you on all platforms coverage throughout the day and tomorrow as well, most likely. But the fact that Joe Biden won this by 0.2% in 2020 indicated to us that it might be a state in play, and it might be a state with such razor-thin margins that it might be worth going and talking to the people here. We have talked to the people here. They've been wonderful and generous with their opinions and sharing their thoughts on not just who they're voting for, why they're voting for that person, but also the electoral process itself, which we have yet to find an American who wasn't enthusiastic and keen, regardless of what spectrum, where they are on the spectrum in terms of political beliefs, that doesn't believe in the integrity of the process and their desire to have their vote registered.
Wow. And speaking of the voters in Georgia, they came out in droves for early voting, even broke some records. What do you think accounts for such intense interest in casting a ballot early?
Well, again, that's the enthusiasm that we've seen down here. There are no fence sitters. We haven't met anyone who said their vote doesn't count. We haven't met anyone who said, it doesn't matter who you vote for. They all think, and again, Republicans, Democrats, right, left, they all think that and believe that they have a key role to play in this. So those 4 million plus of the eligible 7.2 million in the state who registered their votes in that 2 weeks of early voting could be because there's going to be another record turnout for in-person voting on this election day, or it could be people who simply wanted to make sure that nothing interfered with their ability to vote on election day, and so got it out of the way in those first 2 weeks. So will we, when it's all said and done, see a greater number of voters in the state of Georgia, or simply will the math play out with that record voting early and the rest voting on election day itself? Nonetheless, it is proof that people care and they want to hear their voices heard in this pivotal, historic election.
Yeah, interesting. And then over the weekend, you hosted World Report from Savannah, a gorgeous city in Georgia. Today, you're in Atlanta. How would you describe the mood in that state right now, this morning?
I would describe it as, again, passionate about the system, passionate about people's beliefs, and they believe very different things for very different reasons with very different rationales. However, each person we talked to was very passionate about that. And it's also clear that Americans really do feel that the stakes are high in this election. That many of them, right and left, feel that in some respects the future of America is at stake. Certainly the next 4 years in terms of America's foreign policy, America's economy, health care, foreign relations, world peace, honestly, all those elements play out in people's decision to come out and have their voices heard and to be passionate and determined in those opinions.
And of course, the day is young. What are you going to be watching for today, tonight, tomorrow?
Keeping an eye on those polls, of course. We won't have any final numbers until after the polls have closed, of course, but we watched people lined up here long before dawn this morning. Now, the line has dissipated a bit here at the Buckhead Library, but we'll keep a close eye on that. Potentially, could there be incidents, if not in this state, in other states and other polling places around America? There have been some. There may be allegations of voter fraud. Again, we're going to have to watch that, and some of that seems to be politically motivated, but watch what the allegations are and watch who is making those allegations and watch how they're making those allegations. And then, of course, tonight, polls close in this state at 7 p.m. With those advance numbers, we will likely have some very fast out-of-the-gate responses, perhaps within an hour or so, and then watching for the results to come in. And state officials who are Republican, who have something to prove after 2020, when there was that long, protracted process, they have something to prove, and so they are promising fast results. Then, do we sit back and watch what happens in the rest of America? The thing is, so much is unknown at this point, and let's face it, that's why we go into this business, to see what unfolds, and we're going to get a chance to see history unfolding here in the state of Georgia and across America.
CBC's John Northcott in the Peachtree State of Georgia. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks so much, Emily. A pleasure.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
The situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. It's 7:21 -1 and clear right now at the Forks in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Pearly Gates have created a musical antidote to the negativism they're sensing in the world these days. Here's Pearly Gates with Sunny Sunshine Song.
Sunny sunshine song for your honey. I think you need one in the summertime when we're singing a timeless anthem. Let's stay young and free for forever and be remembered. Living out our dreams every minute or else whatever. Go on, race to the finish line. Don't let the blues ease up on your time. Don't be confused, who is on your side. Sunny sunshine song for your honey. Think you could use one. Better reconcile all the madness that you're enduring. Think about it if you put the wheels in motion and pay the tourist. If anybody ever saw the real emotion, I found the cure. Go on, race to the finish line. Don't let the blues ease up all your time. Don't be confused, who is on your side. Now you're complaining about people complaining, and you feel like you could turn into someone you don't feel like, but the problem thickens. Don't be confused who's on your
From Charlottetown, PEI, that was Pearly Gates with Sunny Sunshine Song. And it is going to get sunny today in Winnipeg, going up to a high of 8. Well, time now for a look at sports. Scott Regehr joins us from the CBC Sports Desk. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Emily.
So the Bombers were back out practicing, getting ready for Saturday's big Western final. What's the team saying ahead of that game?
Well, there's lots of excitement, obviously. After the Rough Riders advanced to the final this past weekend, what little tickets were left for the game were quickly snapped up. And it's not just fans that are buzzing. Receiver and Winnipeg native Nick Dembski said the city was buzzing after learning it was Saskatchewan in the final. Quarterback Zach Collaros says that having the Riders as their opponents does provide a little extra motivation.
I think having a face to the opponent definitely helps, and it being a rival, definitely gets guys going. Obviously, you're very familiar with what each other does. Yeah. There could be advantages to that as well. It's a fun game of chess this league provides with so few teams and how many times you got to play each other.
This will be, and this is hard for me to fathom that it's only this much, but just the 10th postseason matchup between these teams. Historically speaking, Saskatchewan's had the better record at 6-4. However, with Collaros under center, the Bombers have won 3 straight now. If that is to continue, they're going to need to win the turnover battle. The Rough Riders, Emily, were the class of the league in that regard, forcing more turnovers than opponents did. At plus 26, they forced more than double the amount of turnovers, in fact, than the next best team, which was Montreal. So Winnipeg only sits at a plus 4, but in most other regards will be considered the favorite at home coming up on Saturday.
Exciting. Okay, so to soccer now, where the defending champions are in action in the Champions League. What's going on there?
Yeah, Real Madrid's going to take on AC Milan in Italy this afternoon, Emily. For Madrid's coach Carlo Ancelotti, this is a chance to face one of his former teams. But the reality is, Ancelotti does not want to play this match. He doesn't want to play any games right now with what's happening back home in Spain, where flooding has killed over 200 people, mostly near Valencia.
Tristeza. Sadness. That's what we're feeling. Just like it's hard to play soccer, you can't keep your head completely in your work because eventually you hear something, read something, or see something about what's happened. Football is a party, and you can only celebrate and party when you, your family, and everybody is well. When people are not well, you don't party. Football has to stop because it is the most important of the least important things in life.
Ancelotti, a man with both a way for words, Emily, and some important perspective as well in a sport driven too often by the mighty dollar, or in this instance, the mighty euro.
Yeah, got to get the currency right. So let's finish up with hockey, where the Jets are going to try to keep their strong start to the season going tonight.
Yeah, incredible stuff. 11-1 thus far, and getting set to host the, for now, Utah Hockey Club. I think they'll be called the Yetis next season, depending on what happens. But this is a team, obviously, that's moved from Arizona, where they were Coyotes, and in their first season in Utah have been pretty good. About a .500 record, obviously, compared to the Jets. That's not particularly outstanding, but still, they're not going to be a soft touch tonight, you wouldn't think, the opponents for Winnipeg, which still has only one sellout this season, that against the Leafs. Even against Pittsburgh and Sidney Crosby in the home opener, it was shy of a sellout. So something's got to give here. The Jets are the class of the NHL. It's certainly time to support them tonight for this game against Utah. Meanwhile, still with hockey. If you have watched 3-on-3 hockey before, Emily, you know that song fits. With all of the open ice, it is a goaltender's nightmare, a spectator's dream. It's why the NHL's employed it to settle games that have gone into overtime. Well, the International Olympic Committee has taken notice. It is considering adding the 3-on-3 version of the sport by the time the 2030 games in the French Alps roll around. The IOC will make a decision by the end of next year, but all signs point to a yes. After all, we've already seen truncated versions of sports like basketball and rugby added to the Summer Olympics, so why not do the same and spice things up for the Winter Games? And that theme song to Benny Hill, thought it would be appropriate outside of the sporting realm today.
Yeah, no kidding. A lot of almost comedic running around happening today. Thanks so much, Scott.
You betcha.
That's Scott Regier, who's joining us from the CBC business, or the sports desk, rather. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. A little bit of mist out there, some frost on the windshields. It's -1, but it's going to be sunny, and we will warm up to another warmer than average day for this time of year, a high of 6. Polling stations are now open on this election day in the United States.
It comes down to this. One more day, just one more day in the most consequential election of our lifetime, and the momentum is on our side.
Delivering her final speech of the campaign, Kamala Harris rallying last night in Philadelphia. She spends today in Washington, D.C., and will watch the results come in tonight at Howard University. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has returned to his estate in Florida, but last night he was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, delivering his final address, including a threat to Mexico and Canada about fentanyl trafficking.
But whether it's Mexico or Canada, we're going to explain to them quickly that if you allow fentanyl and these drugs to come through your country, we're going to charge you large-scale tariffs on everything you send into the United States.
Now, Manitoba's neighbors to the south in North Dakota are feeling some of the division from this election campaign. Phil Hall lives in Pembina. He and his wife are proud Democrats in a predominantly Republican town.
I have a lot of Trump supporters around me. Some are nice. As my neighbor over here, Doug, we get along. We talk just about every day. Then we have some not so nice where we have nothing to say to each other.
North Dakota has been a reliable red state for decades. In 2020, Donald Trump won the popular vote there by 33 percentage points, the third highest margin of any state. Hall says he knows the state will go Trump's way, but he still refuses to vote for him. Now, CBC Radio is going to have live coverage of the U.S. election tonight. We will have up-to-the-minute results, analysis from a Canadian perspective, and correspondence in every swing state. Listen to America Votes on CBC Radio starting at 7 tonight, Central Time. Manitoba's legal community is mourning the loss of Murray Sinclair. The Anishinaabe lawyer was the first Indigenous person appointed a judge in Manitoba. Winnipeg lawyer Brad Regier says his fondest memory of Sinclair involved a play they both performed in as a fundraiser for the Manitoba Bar Association. Regier and his partner had recently had a baby, but Sinclair convinced them to take part in the play by offering to hold their infant son.
And he loved kids. And he just sat there leaning back with Sanjay on his shoulder, the craziness of behind the stage during a play. And he was just this island of calm. And Sanjay, he never made a peep when he was on Murray's shoulder.
Regier was the first Indigenous president of the Canadian Bar Association in 2020, and he calls Sinclair a rock star whose career, he says, had an impact on every Indigenous law student, lawyer, and judge in Canada. Murray Sinclair died early yesterday. He was 73 years old. The city of Winnipeg is still waiting to recoup a $1 million judgment against former CAO Phil Sheagle. That's according to a spokesperson. A 2022 civil court judgment against Phil Sheagle found he accepted a $327,000 bribe from the contractor who built the Winnipeg Police Headquarters. The contractor, Caspian Projects, has yet to pay more than $20 million it owes the city as a result of settling its lawsuit brought by the city. Lawyers for Sheagle and Caspian did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A street census tallying Winnipeg's homeless population gets underway this week. Almost 300 volunteers are going to survey people experiencing homelessness and collect data from agencies working with them. Elijah Osei-Yaboa at End Homelessness Winnipeg says the last survey in 2022 gave a snapshot of trends among those experiencing homelessness.
We saw a strong correlation between educational attainment and homelessness. More than half of our survey respondents didn't have high school education. We also saw a strong correlation between CFS and homelessness. More than half of our survey respondents had been involved in CFS before.
And Osei-Yaboa says this data is vital to understanding the needs of the unhoused and to advocating for more resources. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. It's 7:35. You're listening to Information on CBC, Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. And we are going to actually have a conversation with the folks behind End Homelessness Winnipeg about that upcoming street census and how it'll help Winnipeggers in need. That's coming right up. But first, a look at the weather with Abby Adiemi.
Yeah, from the chilly wake up, we're going to see sunny conditions in the southern regions like, Winnipeg, Brampton, Gimli, Steinbach, Morris. Temperatures will be getting to like mid-single digits, while the northern region will be seen like Thompson and Churchill will mostly see cloudy skies with light snow later today, with cooler temperatures also dominating. Because we're looking at Thompson and Churchill at -1 at this time, and then down south we're seeing Brandon at -6. Gimli, Dauphin, Steinbach all around -3. Morris at -1. Winnipeg at this time -1. Sunny skies ahead and a high of 6.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adiemi. He's also our studio technician. And with him on the other side of the glass is Kevin Nipatebo, who is producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel today. And here with me now in the studio is May McKillop, who has a look at the traffic. A lot going on out there, eh, May?
There's been some collisions this morning. The collision on eastbound Chief Peguis has cleared, so we're in the clear there. But there is a multiple car collision on westbound South Perimeter on the Red River Bridge there. And we got an update of that area from Brody saying that traffic is delayed off the bridge back to about St. Mary's. Again, that's westbound South Perimeter. So expect delays in that area and let me know about anything else you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
Thank you, May. That's May McKillop, who is also our show director. It is now 7:37. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, around the world on the CBC Listen app and on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in today as your host. Well, how many people are currently facing homelessness in Winnipeg? It's an important question that aims to be answered with the 2024 Winnipeg Street Census. Every 2 years, volunteers with End Homelessness Winnipeg collect data from various city shelters and from the streets. The survey is called Winnipeg's Point-in-Time Count to address homelessness. Later this morning, an event will kick off that census. Elijah Osei-Yaboa is with End Homelessness Winnipeg. He joins us now. Good morning, Elijah.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, what do you hope to learn from the street census?
I hope this year the street census will give us an estimate of how many Winnipeggers experience homelessness in a day. We also want to know their pathways into homelessness, their length of time experiencing homelessness, and we also want to know their demographic characteristics like age, sex, gender, and sexual orientation.
Okay. And how is that data going to be collected?
So we have trained hundreds of volunteers and outreach teams who will be working through the city starting from this Wednesday all the way to Saturday, speaking with people experiencing homelessness. They will record their experiences and we will analyze the data and put it into a report.
Okay. And so hundreds of volunteers trained, you mentioned. How do you prepare them for this initiative?
The interesting thing is for some of the volunteers, this will be the first time they are working in the sector, so we need to ensure they are well trained. And if you work with those experiencing homelessness, there's a chance that some people might even be distressed during the service. So we need to train them on how to handle all of these things. So, and we also train them on safety measures because it's our responsibility to ensure that all the volunteers who will go out there to conduct surveys are safe. Those of us who also do the planning, it's our responsibility to ensure that everyone involved is also kept safe as well. So we have an intensive training that we put together for our volunteers.
Mm-hmm. And as they go out and meet people experiencing homelessness, what kind of questions are they going to ask?
Thanks for asking that question. We receive 15 mandatory questions from the federal government since the feds are funding the project. The core survey questions included age, the type of homelessness people are experiencing, whether it's chronic, whether it's episodic, whether they've always lived in Winnipeg or whether they came from elsewhere. And we added several locally relevant questions. The locally relevant questions do include challenges to accessing EIA and staying on it, whether folks are currently looking for housing and the supports that they need to be able to find permanent housing.
Mm-hmm. And then, when the volunteers are out there, how do they decide who to talk to collect that information?
We always train the volunteers that they shouldn't judge a book by its cover. So we train them to talk to any person they see on the streets. There are people who, by their appearance, it might be very difficult to determine whether they're experiencing homelessness or not. So we train them to speak with any person that they encounter on the streets.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then why is it important that this data is collected directly from people who are experiencing homelessness?
It is important because we need to give them a voice. And by doing so, it will help us better understand their experiences so we can improve service delivery. And, no one chooses homelessness, right? So we need to understand why there are still many people who live rough on the streets.
Okay. And, the last census was held in 2022. What did the results say about homelessness then? And how do you expect the results might be different now?
That's a very good question. For the 2024 report, we will start data collection this week, and a good researcher doesn't speculate. So I'll refrain from speaking about the results from this year's project because we haven't collected the data yet. But when it comes to the 2022 report, there were some key insights from the report. One is Indigenous people were vastly overrepresented in homelessness. Indigenous people constituted as high as 75% of those who were experiencing homelessness. In other words, for every 4 people experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg, sadly, 3 of them identify as homelessness. We also saw a strong correlation between CFS, that is Child and Family Services, and homelessness, as more than half of our survey respondents had been involved with CFS before. We also saw a strong correlation between educational attainment and homelessness, which suggests that if we are able to keep our youth in school longer, it can help address homelessness, because we saw that more than half of our survey respondents didn't even have high school education.
Wow, so interesting. So we've only got about a minute left, Elijah, but before you go, can you tell us how the data that's collected is going to be used?
That's a very good question. We have several ways of using the data. The first thing is we will organize a community event where we will launch the report. We will invite all our partners to the event. And in addition, once the report is ready, we will ask for meetings with the 4 levels of government to discuss the insights from the report and solutions to homelessness in Winnipeg. In addition, we will share the report findings and our recommendations at conferences in and outside Winnipeg. Last year, for instance, I was in Halifax for the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness conference, which is the biggest in the housing and homelessness sector. And I shared the report findings and recommendations.
Thank you so much for explaining everything, and good luck with the survey.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Elijah Ose-Yaboa is the Evaluation and Shared Measurement Manager with End Homelessness Winnipeg, and Winnipeg's point-in-time count to address homelessness launches today at 10 a.m. at the Sports Manitoba building on Pacific Avenue. It is coming up on 7:45. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, many Manitobans have taken a drive down I-29, passing small hamlets and communities along the way. It's a trip CBC host Marcy Marcusa and associate producer Corey Funk made just yesterday. They took the opportunity to get off the interstate and went into the town of Grafton. It's home to about 4,100 people, and that's where they found 3 voters with different hopes for today's historic election. The first person they found is Rita Beneda. She retired from a career in banking and has 3 children and 13 grandchildren. She's lived in North Dakota her whole life and calls the nearby community of Park River home. Rita Beneda was shopping for groceries at Hugo's supermarket in Grafton when she stopped to talk to Marcy.
I voted Trump all the way. I am total Republican. My main reason for voting Republican, I guess, is abortion. I am not for abortion at all, no matter in what way. I mean, I understand some of their thinking, but it's not my health care that I want, is abortion. No. So.
You said you've always voted Republican, but when I asked how you voted, the first thing you said was Trump and not Republican. Has the party changed, do you think?
I don't think so. I think it's stayed the same. I know a lot of people don't agree with what he says a lot of the time. He is blunt. He says it to the point. But I feel he's for the people more so than just women's rights. The baby doesn't have any rights.
Obviously, abortion's the big issue for you. But what other policies spoke to you when you think of your life here in North Dakota?
Rural issues, I think, are a big deciding factor. Trump will get oil back in process. I mean, he'll get us on our own instead of being dependent on other countries.
There are a lot of women that have taken exception, to some of the things Donald Trump has said. I think most recently saying he'd be the protector of women, whether they like it or not, was one of the comments. How does all of that sit with you?
It sits okay with me. I think, like I said, I think he rattles off at the mouth a lot, but I think when it comes down to it, he's going to be there for the people. He's well-rounded. I mean, he's not just for women's rights, and that's the only thing I think Kamala's got going for her right now.
You said rural a couple times. So there's something about either the Democrats and Kamala Harris that not speaking maybe to you rurally.
I think they are more big city.
What's the mood been like leading up to this?
It's been more openly, I think, this time around. People are more willing to say they're going to vote one way or the other than hide it.
Were people hiding it in the last time around?
I think so. I know one of the candidates said you don't have to be open about what you vote for. I mean, to me, that's not right. I think that you need to be open of what you stand for. Family against family is what it comes down to.
That was Rita Beneda from Park River, North Dakota. Marcy also met up with someone throwing all of the predictions for today out the window, and that's because John D. DeMeester is going to decide at the ballot box who will get his vote. He spoke with Marcy as he was sweeping up leaves on the sidewalk outside his workplace.
You better hope it doesn't get windy again. You're going to continue sweeping the leaves all day.
Yeah. I'm about up here about every day too.
And do you live here in Grafton?
Live right here in Grafton. I been working with Ag Country Farm Credit for about 46 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I've lived here at Grafton since 1942. My boys and I, they lost their mother at age 55. They have told me, since we lost our mom, you have treated us like a mother and a father because you've been that close to us.
Wow.
My youngest one is 59. The oldest one is 61.
So how old are you now, sir?
No, I mean, just turned 87.
You going to vote or have you voted already?
No, I'm going to vote. Yeah.
And what are you thinking about? What party do you support?
Well, actually, I am a nonpartisan. You rather weigh it out both ways. There is good and a lot of good and very a lot of good about Harris as far as trying to hold the economy down for people. I'm still undecided yet before I get there.
Wow.
Ready? It's
tomorrow.
It's that touchy for me.
Wow.
I mean, I'll possibly make up my mind when I'm standing in the line ready to go in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you're in the ballot box tomorrow, what kinds of things will you be thinking about?
Even though I'm 87 years old, I do feel that, they've got to start getting more younger people in Congress and start going along with that age limit and disqualifying a lot of the older people away from the table.
Okay. Now, is that a comment on Donald Trump's age, or are you talking about something else? I'm just making sure I understand what you're saying.
That's including Donald Trump. If Harris does get in, there are a lot of things that she had forwarded over to her from Biden that I did not like.
Give me an example of one.
A lot of this money that had been going over to other countries and helping other countries. Don't you suppose, people, that we should have a lot of that aid right here in our own country?
So then if you're in the ballot box tomorrow and you're thinking about what you don't like about Trump.
Well, he would be good in many ways. The other way, with that wall of bringing everybody coming over to our country, you get so many thousands of people over from there from any other country, the wages for our young people are going to be cut and lowered in order to support the people, immigrants coming over here.
So you have a huge worry about immigration. What don't you like about Trump?
What I don't like about him is the fact that he talks out of turn too much. Too much. There's too much slamming going on onto others. This idea of slamming has cut Trump down on a lot of votes coming in. He's asked for it because his mouth has run away with him. Yeah. I do feel that Harris does have a lot better mannerism by far, and I think I'm just about making up my mind right now talking to you about which way it might be going.
That was John D. DeMeester from Grafton, North Dakota. Meanwhile, CBC's Corey Funk was nearby with a voter who had one word on how she was feeling about today's election: anxious. Jessie Van Camp cast an early ballot. She has 3 children, including a 10-year-old daughter. Van Camp lives in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, and Corey noticed her license plate as she was pumping gas.
I voted for Kamala Harris because she's not a tyrant and she's competent, and I just think that she could do wonderful things for our country. She focuses on bringing people together. Obviously, reproductive rights are super important to me. Both of my children were born through IVF, and so I would hate to see that lost for other people. Not to mention the dangers of not being in control of your health care. That's just horrendous for any person. I'm a lawyer, and I don't like seeing what the Supreme Court has done. It's just changed the entire legal landscape of our country since the Conservative majority took over. So.
What's it meant for your community? What's it like in your community ahead of the election in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, right now?
I try not to engage with people that are not open to real discussion because I am surrounded mostly by conservatives, and I think that the scariest part of this for me, there are some that I talk to. My dad specifically is a Trump voter, and so. There are people that I have had longer conversations with about it, and I think the scariest thing for me is that the people that are voting for him, like the people that are educated and usually weigh decisions very carefully and things like that, those people are voting for him because they don't believe that he'll do the things he says he's going to do. They're so used to him lying. I feel like when Roe was overturned, I felt like my chosen profession, like it betrayed me. It's been a hard couple of years.
Might be a little while till we know who is president. It might not necessarily be Wednesday morning. We know, but when you do find out if it is Trump or Kamala, like what do you think moving forward is going to look like for you and your family? Like you said, your dad's a Trump supporter. What do you think life is going to look like for you with either outcome?
I think that if Kamala wins, I'm scared about the immediate aftermath, what will happen with Trump supporters. My dad is not one of these people that's, going to go out and cause violence and things like that. But I am concerned about what happens in the Capitol. But outside of that, I hope that moving forward, if she wins, everybody can kind of look back on this and say, yeah, what were we thinking? And we can maybe get back to a middle road of politics, because the extreme sides on both sides, I don't think they represent the vast majority of people in our country. If Donald Trump wins, I don't know. I applied for my passport expedited last week. I had gotten my children's earlier this year. It really is not out of the question for me. If I feel that I'm not safe or that my kids aren't safe, I would leave.
Where would you go? Canada?
I would start with Canada, yeah. We're just 3 hours from the border, actually an hour from the border, 3 hours from Winnipeg, so I would start there.
Start in Winnipeg. That was Jesse Van Camp in conversation with CBC's Corey Funk. They were in Grafton, North Dakota. Marcy and Corey will be live tomorrow with an election special from Fargo. And CBC will be covering the U.S. election all day today and into tomorrow. You can tune in here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM here in Winnipeg, or on the CBC Listen app. You can also go to our website, the national page, in fact, cbc.ca/news, or you can check out one of our television channels. Well, standing by with a look at the Manitoba news headlines is Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the city of Winnipeg is still waiting to recoup a $1 million judgment against former CAO Phil Schiegel. That's according to a spokesperson. A 2022 civil court judgment against Schiegel found he accepted a $327,000 bribe from the contractor who built the Winnipeg Police Headquarters. The contractor, Caspian Projects, has yet to pay more than $20 million it owes the city as a result of settling its lawsuit brought by the city. Manitoba's legal community is feeling the loss of Murray Sinclair. Among his many groundbreaking roles, Sinclair was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge. Brad Regier was a law student when he met Sinclair in the early 1990s. He says there isn't a single Indigenous judge or lawyer or law student who doesn't know the legacy of Murray Sinclair. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba Newsroom. Well, we're coming up on National News Time. First, a look at the traffic with our show director, May McKillop. Sounds like you've been a bit busy over there answering the phone, May.
I've been a bit busy answering the phone. This is true. I'll let our listeners know about the first spot that I've heard about. This is a stalled car on northbound Osborne. This is at the underpass just before Confusion Corner. If you're heading north, Sarah called to let us know that there's a stalled vehicle in the median lane. As well, I've been reporting about a multiple car collision on South Perimeter, the westbound South Perimeter on the Red River Bridge. We got a call updating around the area and how the collision is affecting the commute. Eastbound is quite slow moving on the South Perimeter, but westbound is like a parking lot, we heard. Now, unfortunately, we also just heard about another collision on South Perimeter at St. Mary's, which has left that intersection closed in all directions for now. I'll keep my eye on that area and give an update as soon as I can, but expect delays and avoid the area if possible. Anything else you're seeing out there, please give me a call and let me know. 204-788-3093.
Thank you, May. And of course, it is pretty frosty, a little slippery out there on certain surfaces in Winnipeg. Right now, it is -1 and clear at the Forks. Sunny today in Winnipeg, going up to a high of 6. Clear tonight, increasing cloudiness overnight with a low of -3. And for tomorrow, mainly cloudy with a high of +3. In Brandon, sunny today, high 8. Increasing cloudiness early this evening and becoming breezy with a low of 0. Cloudy tomorrow with a slight chance of showers in the morning. Becoming breezy again in the afternoon with a high of +4. And for Thompson, cloudy today, slight chance of flurries this morning. Light breeze with a high of +2. Cloudy tonight with a low of -3. And then cloudy again tomorrow with a high of -1. Well, still to come on Information Radio, we're going to speak with Manitoba Chief Justice Glenn Joyal about the late Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair and his impact on our province's legal system and on reconciliation nationwide. That's all coming up on Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. World Report is coming up next.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
You might remember JoJo shot to the top of the pop charts in the early 2000s with songs like Leave, Get Out, and Too Little Too Late. And then she kind of disappeared. JoJo will be here to tell you where she went and why she's telling her story now in a new memoir. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel-Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Well, after months of anticipation, it's finally Election Day in the United States, and we'll hear from voters about what this day means for them in a country that is very divided at a time where many important issues are on the ballot. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Some are calling it one of the closest presidential races in U.S. history. The polls are now open. And over the course of the day, millions of Americans will cast their ballots to elect either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. One of the swing states that could decide this election is Georgia. My World Report co-host, John Northcott, joins me now from a polling station in Atlanta. And John, what is happening where you are as the polls open?
Marcia, I'm at Buckhead Library, which is one of 45 polling places in Fulton County. About 1 million people live in Fulton County. It's part of Atlanta and a huge voting bloc there in terms of the state overall. I can tell you that people started lining up at this polling place about an hour and a quarter before polls open. Minutes before they open, there are 30 people lined up. There are strict rules around how close you can get as a member of the media. We have to be away from that. And in fact, poll workers were out early this morning, long before dawn, pulling up campaign signs that they say were not allowed within 150 feet of the polling place. So very strict rules in terms of where people can be and what they can be exposed to on their way into the polling places from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. tonight, and then the task of counting the votes.
You attended some rallies last night. What are you hearing from voters?
We went to a Harris Walls rally, spoke to a number of people there, enthusiasm in the crowd, a lot of energy, and we spoke to a young man, and his name is Hunter Shallis. He's trans, and he knows that in a Donald Trump presidency, he would not receive the care that he says he needs. Have a listen.
The thing is that none of the people I want to vote for are currently on the ballot, but this would lead our country forward rather than backwards. She supports, bringing back abortion rights. She supports, protecting LGBTQ rights.
Now, before we went to that rally, we stopped by and talked to some Trump supporters. A man by the name of Thomas Page. Here is his reasons for why he today will be voting for Donald Trump.
He loves America. He doesn't care about the money because he has his own money anyways. He loves America, and he's going to bring God back into schools. He's bring God back into the United States. And he's all about that because he comes first.
Marcy, we've been here for almost a week, and that division and that passion and that commitment from both sides is being felt with practically everyone we've talked to.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Marcia.
My World Report co-host, John Northcott in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a busy day for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump yesterday. The two candidates made their final push for votes during several campaign stops. Now this election is down to the voters and whether either candidate has been able to resonate with their vision for America. Ashley Burke is covering the Harris campaign from Washington, D.C. And Ashley, when it comes to Kamala Harris, what does the path to victory look like?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign says they have multiple paths to hit 270 electoral votes, which is what they need to win. But their most direct way would be to claim victory over what they call the blue wall states, which are three battlegrounds, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Harris was there last night in Philadelphia and expressed optimism she could win, but she also said it could be one of the closest races in history. And in her closing message, she continued to drop former President Donald Trump's name from her stump speech. And she told voters she was offering them a clean break from the Trump era of politics that she says is driven by division and fear.
America is ready for a fresh start, ready for a new way forward where we see our fellow American not as an enemy, but as a neighbor.
What is Kamala Harris doing today?
Harris is going to be here in Washington today. Her campaign says she'll be doing a series of interviews and that they are trying to reach as many people as possible so that they hear her vision. Now, her campaign has also set up a stage, stands, a jumbotron at Howard University, where we expect to hear her speak at some point. It's her alma mater, one of the U.S.'s historically Black colleges and universities, and where she's hoping to make history as the first graduate of one of these schools to become president. I've been on campus talking to students there who are first-time voters, and here's what Savannah McDonald and Haley Beckwith told me about the significance of this.
If you just go back 40 years, we were fighting for our civil rights, so the fact that a woman of color could be the first female president of the United States, it's just really exciting to see.
Just hearing her speak and her voice and her being from Howard, like, it's such an emotional time for me.
They also said they're feeling nervous about their safety if Trump doesn't get the results he wants.
All right. Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ashley Burke in Washington. During his stop in Pittsburgh yesterday, Donald Trump once again took aim at Kamala Harris's rally crowd size.
I don't know if you know, but Kamala has a little rally going on. And when I say little, I mean little. And it's quite embarrassing. It's all over the internet. She's screaming, and the people, it's about 100 people. They're not moving. They just want to go home.
Trump is expected to take in the results as they begin rolling in tonight at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. Tom Perry is covering Donald Trump's campaign from Florida. We'll hear from him next hour. Today's election is also being closely watched by people outside North America. People across Europe are wondering how these results could affect them. Crystal Gomensing has the story from London.
In the United States is, of course, still the most powerful of the great powers.
Sven Biskop is a professor and world program director at Belgium's Egmont Institute, a European think tank. Biskop says Donald Trump was unpredictable during the 4 years he was president.
We didn't know whether the U.S. position in the morning would still be the U.S. position in the afternoon.
A return to a Republican president could put more pressure on Europe, especially when it comes to Ukraine. The U.S. has provided it with more than $64 billion in military assistance since Russia's full-scale invasion. Trump said he would stop the supply of arms. Europe can't fill that void. During the debate with Vice President Kamala Harris in September, Trump also said he could end the war before officially taking office.
That is a war that's dying to be settled.
In Europe, it's not just about ending the war, but stopping Russia, says German politician Norbert Röttgen.
This war is about European peace, European security.
NATO was created in part to protect Europe. Baked into that was American might. Trump previously said the U.S. may not protect those who don't meet defense spending commitments. Mark Rutte is NATO's Secretary General.
We will work with Kamala Harris, we will work with Donald Trump, because they are not in this to repeat the mistake after the First World War of withdrawing from Europe.
As Americans cast their ballots, they'll be leaving a mark on global security. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Tonight, tune in to America Votes on CBC Radio, hosted by Your World Tonight's Susan Bonner and Pia Chattopadhyay of the Sunday Magazine. You can listen on CBC Radio and Sirius XM or stream it live on CBC Listen or the CBC News app. It all begins tonight at 7 o'clock Central, 6 Mountain. And join us again tomorrow morning for the latest results and reaction. Canadians are reflecting on Murray Sinclair's legacy. And in the North, the late senator brought stories of Northern residential school survivors to light. People there are pushing forward with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. Kate Kyle reports.
At the national gathering in Inuvik in 2011, Truth and Reconciliation Commission Chair Murray Sinclair spoke to residential school survivors.
Your story is important. It has strength. It has the strength to educate and to heal.
Sinclair and his commission toured all 3 territories, listening and documenting testimony from thousands of survivors, like Adeline Weber. She's now Yukon's commissioner.
He gave people hope. Their stories were listened to, they were understood, they were believed.
Peter Ilnick is also a residential school survivor. He traveled with Sinclair to many of those hearings as his advisor on Inuit culture.
He wanted to know our ways of doing things, and he was a fearless man. He had a lot of courage to speak about all of the Indigenous people have gone through at the residential school.
all documented in the TRC's final report, and 94 calls to action.
They go so far as to say that cultural genocide occurred.
Bill Erasmus is a former chief of the Dene Nation. He describes Sinclair as a monumental person who made a difference that will be generational.
It's important for us now to look back at the work that he did and to ask if we've really made the kind of change that he wanted.
Kate Kyle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime. CBCnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. Here's what's still to come on the show. We'll speak with Manitoba Chief Justice Glenn Joyal about how he'll remember the late Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair, his legacy on our provincial legal system, and what needs to happen to uphold that legacy in the wake of his death. Abby Adiyemi is going to have a look at the forecast, and May McKillop will update us on the roads. So stay tuned. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Eleven minutes after 8 o'clock, Heather Wells has the CBC Manitoba News headlines.
Good morning. Well, we're going to take you back down to North Dakota on this U.S. election day. Manitoba's neighbor to the south has been Republican red for decades. 28-year-old Dylan Yukolich is a Republican volunteer in Fargo. He says Donald Trump's track record on the economy and trade is solid. We're going to hear more from him. As well, a street census tallying Winnipeg's homeless population gets underway in Winnipeg this week. Almost 300 volunteers are going to survey people who are experiencing homelessness and collect data from agencies that work with them. We're going to hear what they're going to do with that data coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. -1 right now, and we are going to... It is now 11 minutes after 8 o'clock, and Abby Adiyemi has a look at the forecast.
Yeah, a mix of sunny skies in the south and cloudy conditions with light snow in the north. That's what we're seeing. The northern part of the region, talking about the Churchill, should see about 2 centimeters of snow today. Down south, we're going to see plenty of sunshine and highs, reaching 2 degrees in Thompson and warming up to close to 8 degrees for Brampton. Clear skies will definitely shift tonight, and we'll see temperatures dropping significantly in most of the areas as we get into the overnight period. Right now, Winnipeg, -1 with spotted mist here and there. We're going to see the sunny condition already happening out there. Light breeze. We're going to warm up to about 6 degrees, though it feels like -8 this morning. And then tonight, this clear condition, we will enjoy it, but then as we get close to the overnight period, some clouds will be rolling in, and we'll see temperatures drop to around -3. The north, as mentioned, cooler temperatures with periods of snow, and we'll see highs around 2 degrees there. Thompson and Churchill hovering around 0 at this point, and then we're seeing Brandon and Dauphin at -6. The sun already making its appearance. We're going to see highs near 8 degrees. Gimli, Steinbach, Maurice, all sitting around -3. Sunny conditions already being spotted there. Plenty of sunshine in the forecast, and we'll see highs reaching 6 degrees today. So in a nutshell, down south, we're going to enjoy lots of sunshine, and then up north, we're going to see snow. But for tonight, we're going to get some clouds rolling and a colder day tomorrow. I know we don't want to hear that, but it's going to be cooler tomorrow.
How much colder, Abby?
Let's just stay around -7.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, I don't know if I'm ready, but thank you for that information. I'll try to prepare.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. He's also our studio technician. And with him on the other side of the glass is Kevin Nibatabo, who's producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel this morning. And you may have heard that phone ringing while Abby was doing the weather. Our show director, May McKillop, has been very busy answering the phones today because there's quite a lot going on in the traffic, isn't there?
It's true. And I will just say, if you ever call and we don't pick up, it's okay to call back. Sometimes we're just in the other room delivering the news.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
I'll let our listeners know we have a stalled car on northbound Osborne at the underpass just before Confusion Corner. If you're heading north, that stalled car is in the median lane. So expect delays there. As well, we have a multiple car collision on a westbound South Perimeter on the Red River Bridge. So we've got a call updating that area in the last half hour. Eastbound is very slow moving, and westbound South Perimeter we heard is like a parking lot in the last hour. Hopefully that clears up soon. Although I will let our listeners know we've heard about another collision on southbound Perimeter at St. Mary's, which has left that intersection closed in all directions. So expect delays if you're in that area and avoid it if possible. And just a reminder, it's frosty out. We're dealing with colder conditions. Stay safe out there on the roads and look out for slippery areas. If you see anything that you want to let me know about, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
It's 8:15. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, around the world on the CBC Listen app and on our website as well, streaming live right now on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass. Well, people across our province and across the country are remembering the Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair. He died yesterday morning in a Winnipeg hospital, and Sinclair was often a groundbreaker in his decades-long career. He was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge, overseeing an inquiry into racism in the provincial justice system. He also laid out a path for reconciliation as head of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission into residential schools. And over the course of his career, Manitoba Chief Justice Glenn Joyal often worked alongside Sinclair. He says Sinclair's legacy can be seen across Canada. And Justice Joyal joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Emily.
So how will you personally remember Justice Sinclair?
Well, when I was reflecting on Murray's life and my interaction with Murray, I just sort of invoked four images that I think capture my experience with him. And every human being is multidimensional, so no one wants to be reduced to any one image. But I think these four, for me, capture Murray Sinclair. First of all, I see him, like so many, as a national figure, as in his national profile. I said yesterday when I spoke to a few journalists that he was an exemplary and historic figure who challenged and inspired a generation of Canadians, and his impact would be nothing short of monumental. I mean, he did nothing short of bringing the concept of reconciliation into the national consciousness. And that will be certainly one image that most Canadians most clearly have of Murray Sinclair. The second image, though, I think is, for me, as important, and I don't think this should be lost in the celebration of Murray's life, and that's his life as a judge. He was my colleague, both on the provincial court and in the court of then Queen's Bench. I became Associate Chief Justice at one point and a Chief Justice, and I had occasion to work with him during that period. He was a good judge. He was a judge who, separate and apart from his later more national profile, was the first Indigenous judge, as you indicated in your introduction, in Manitoba. But he was also a judge who manifested in his judicial career the signs of what would come later. He, on a day-to-day basis, in a very tangible and concrete way, dispensed justice in a way that, in his own way, whether dealing with Indigenous litigants or accused persons, was mindful of this notion of reconciliation. He wanted to legitimate the institution, but he also wanted to dispense justice. So Murray wasn't someone as a judge who intellectualized or rendered abstract the law. He wanted to make it concrete and he wanted it to be applied in a way that was consistent with the equities and what he viewed as justice. We didn't always agree on everything, no judges do, but there was never any doubt about what was animating and impassioning Murray when it came to acting upon his vision of justice. The third image I have of Murray is of a mentor, both as a lawyer early on, then as a judge, and then as the national figure, as I referred to him. He took advantage of those moments of profile to nourish a new generation of Indigenous lawyers, judges, and activists. But it wasn't just the Indigenous citizens of Canada; it was others. And there's a whole slew of lawyers across the country, of judges across the country, some at the highest levels, who were in some ways mentored or inspired by Murray Sinclair. So one would be wrong to diminish or minimize his impact in that sense, because that really is, because of its future orientation, going to be an important part of his legacy. And finally, was as a proud father. I didn't know his family as well as some, but I certainly had met his wife on many occasions. His son Nagan has done us the privilege of working on a committee, a reconciliation committee that we have in the court. So it's clear what he was able to nourish in terms of his family life, but what was equally clear was how he spoke about them. And it was a balance that was incredible. I'm sure, like most men who accomplished a lot, he gave up important parts of his time with family. I'm sure he made sacrifices that he wished he didn't have. But as part of his public service, he was perhaps forced to do that, but there was never any doubt about how he prioritized them. So when I think about Murray Sinclair, I think about those four images, and I think it's wrong to compartmentalize them. They all fit as one, but they all are for me part of who Murray Sinclair was.
Yeah, such a tremendous impact, as you mentioned, on so many levels. Indeed, a historical figure in Canadian, modern history. He advanced the national conversation on reconciliation during his time as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as well. What has been the impact of that framework on our legal system here in Manitoba, that framework of reconciliation?
Well, I mean, he's compelled a dialogue in the justice system. I mean, his calls to action specifically include calls to action that are relevant to the justice system. I've spoken before and recently about the need to gain the trust of our Indigenous co-citizens. We have to legitimate our system. They have to believe in our system, and we have to ensure that we can have a dialogue with our Indigenous neighbors such that we can work with them to gain that trust. We need to address what are the particular problems and challenges in the justice system. There still remains a disproportionate number of cases in our court that have a particular impact on Indigenous Manitobans, whether it's in the criminal justice system or in child protection. And we have to find new ways of maximizing our capacity to deal with those challenges in a better way. And a good place to start is to look at some of those calls to action. He just, I think, has normalized the idea of reconciliation in all institutions. And our institution is no different. As I said to you a moment ago, we have a committee, the Trust, Reconciliation, and Access to Justice Committee, which, based on four pillars, outreach, education, systemic change, and normalizing of systemic change, tries to address some of what Murray Sinclair himself identified as needs for improvement. So I'm speaking only in respect of my institution, but I think that that conversation is happening everywhere, not just amongst institutions, but also amongst, individuals and households who in their own way are grappling with the question, how can I make a difference? So when we talk about what he normalized by bringing this concept of reconciliation to the national consciousness, I think it's that we're getting at.
And then, on that theme of normalizing reconciliation, you touched on him being a mentor to the legal community here in Manitoba. How has that played out in his legacy, influencing that next generation of people in the legal system to consider reconciliation in their work?
Well, he's influenced lawyers in and judges across the country, not just in Manitoba, Emily. So it's really quite incredible. But he always, I mean, if you look at the firm that he was associated with in Manitoba, many of these lawyers were in fact mentors, or were in fact recipients of his mentorship. But you can go across the country and see that. He would come and speak to judges of each court in this country, and primarily the province, and he would reiterate what it is he always identified as the key to future improvement and progress in the area of this project of reconciliation. He would talk about the need to nourish mutual trust and respect. And without that, there would be nothing. He also talked about the importance of education. His quote that he would oftentimes come back to is, "Education got us into this mess, and education will get us out of this mess." Education in the sense that we have to be willing to learn about those things that perhaps need to be corrected and those things that now need to be better understood. In the context of the legal system, we need to learn more about Indigenous legal traditions and how those can perhaps be incorporated in ways that, as I say, legitimate and earn in a better way the trust of our Indigenous citizens here in Manitoba and everywhere. So his mentorship involved not just individual mentorship, but a kind of an educational component when he spoke to judges of various courts. And it was always done with the patience, Emily, and the generosity. We're still living in an era where people, for example, judges are concerned about judicial independence, and we have to be. But I think we have to be, in some instances, bold in terms of trying to find a way to address what he identified as the challenges as it relates to reconciliation. So he understood the debate and the tension between those two concepts, the idea that we needed to be somewhat restrained for the purposes of retaining judicial independence and impartiality, but at the same time we had to be bold. He had understood that tension, and he was generous with those who questioned about how we could do it. Because he understood, in some instances, that discussion that he was having was part of the educational process. So, when I talk about his mentorship, I'm using the term mentorship broadly defined, and he was a key participant in that mentorship, which can easily be seen as education more broadly. So that has to be seen as part of his legacy. And going forward, I think, as he would say, that is the best hope.
Well, yeah. And I mean, speaking of going forward, as you touched on, still, Indigenous people disproportionately experiencing, encounters with the justice system. How do you hope we press forward, to honor his memory and his legacy and press forward on that in the wake of his passing?
Well, it would be presumptuous for me to sort of prescribe what I think is the solution. I'll simply rely upon his always humble and modest prescription. Let's be optimistic, but let's be mindful of the fact that the key will be building a mutual trust and respect. But it will happen only if we educate ourselves and engage with the issues that he and others have now brought to the fore. We don't always have to agree completely with respect to the solution, but individuals and institutions will have to grapple with this idea that what we need to work towards is this idea of mutual trust and respect, however we get there. And, the calls to action, for example, are a good place to begin not just the discussion, but as importantly, action. And I think he would certainly, in his generous and optimistic spirit, endorse that view as at least a starting point. And he would always say, when I spoke to him, that this notion, this normative or aspirational goal of reconciliation is a long project, and it's not going to happen necessarily in our lives, but to the extent that progress will continue to be inexorably made, that itself is success. And again, he wasn't someone who would want to settle for short-term successes, but on this particular subject, I think he realized that going forward, it was going to have to be a long-term project. And as long as it ended, and as long as it was during the course of that journey, resulting in increasing mutual respect, it had the prospects for an optimistic end.
Wow, what an incredible legacy and work that is still continuing after his death. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your memories and all your experiences with Justice Sinclair.
Well, it's my privilege, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to do this. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. That was Manitoba Chief Justice Glenn Joyal. The Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair was known as Mazina Gizik, or the one who speaks of pictures in the sky. He died yesterday at the age of 73.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
8:29 coming up on local news time. But first, speaking of Radio Noon, today's host, Lori Hoog-Stratton, joins me now in the studio. What's coming up on the show today, Lori?
Hi, Emily. Well, you may recall that just a little while ago, Quebec decided to honor advance directives when it came to medical assistance in dying, and the federal government said that they would not interfere. So we thought today we're going to talk to somebody from the Winnipeg chapter of Dying with Dignity and just find out what it is that Manitobans want when it comes to healthcare directives and advance directives around MAID.
That is such a complicated and interesting subject.
Very much.
And you'll be taking calls?
We will be taking calls. Give us a call at 204-780-0893, or you can text at 204-588-7355.
Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you.
And now the news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is still -1, but that sun is shining, and it's going to warm us up to a high of 6 this afternoon. After a long, divisive campaign, today is Election Day in the United States.
We are ready for a president who knows that the true measure of a leader is not based on who you beat down, but based on who you lift up.
Delivering her final speech of the campaign, Kamala Harris, last night in Philadelphia. Her opponent, Donald Trump, meanwhile, giving his final address in Grand Rapids, Michigan, promising if Mexico and Canada don't stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S., he would slap punitive tariffs on both countries.
Whether it's Mexico or Canada or wherever, because they're starting now in Canada, they're starting to go up north. But whether it's Mexico or Canada, we're going to explain to them quickly that if you allow fentanyl and these drugs to come through your country, we're going to charge you large-scale tariffs on everything you send into the United States.
Now, last week, the Mounties announced a massive drug bust in BC. They say they discovered the largest and most sophisticated drug super lab in Canada. Now, Manitoba's neighbor to the south is not a swing state in this election. CBC reporter Ian Fraze is in North Dakota.
This is one of the reddest states in the U.S. In 2020, Trump won around 2/3 of the popular vote, while the Democratic candidate Joe Biden got around 1/3. So that really shows, how popular Trump is. That is the outcome we're expecting, but I'm really looking to see how popular the Trump brand is. I spoke to one political scientist who says he's not seen as many overt displays, not as many Trump signs, not as many Trump flags as he's used to. He's confident Trump's still going to win and get their vote, but he wonders if their enthusiasm is waning.
CBC's Ian Fraze in North Dakota for us. Now, CBC is going to have live coverage of the U.S. election tonight. We will have up-to-the-minute results, analysis from a Canadian perspective, and correspondents in every swing state. Listen to America Votes on CBC Radio starting at 7 o'clock tonight, Central Time. Manitoba's legal community is feeling the loss of Murray Sinclair. Among his many groundbreaking roles, Sinclair was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge. Brad Regier was a law student when he met Sinclair in the early 1990s. He says Sinclair has been a fixture over his 27-year career.
I'm pretty confident that I can say that there's not a single Indigenous judge or lawyer or law student who doesn't know of the legacy of Murray Sinclair.
Regier was the first Indigenous president of the Canadian Bar Association. Murray Sinclair led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission examining the history of Canada's residential school system. He was later appointed an independent senator. Murray Sinclair died early yesterday. He was 73 years old. Well, the head of St. Boniface Street Links is concerned about the future. This week, a city committee will vote on whether to continue a short-term agreement to allow the group to lease 604 St. Mary's Road for $1. The lease expires November of 2025. Right now, Street Links uses the building for a 20-bed hospital transition unit, drop-in center, and a winter emergency shelter. Marion Willis says their future is uncertain because the city has plans to build affordable housing on that site.
It seems pretty counterintuitive to displace or make homeless the organization that works to prevent homelessness, to make us and the people we serve homeless in exchange for building affordable housing units.
Willis says the building is perfect for her group's needs and is having a positive impact on the people it serves. A street census tallying Winnipeg's homeless population gets underway this week. Almost 300 volunteers will survey people experiencing homelessness and collect data from agencies working with them. Elijah Osei-Yeboah at End Homelessness Winnipeg says the last survey in 2022 gave a snapshot of trends among those experiencing homelessness.
We saw a strong correlation between educational attainment and homelessness. More than half of our survey respondents didn't have high school education. We also saw a strong correlation between CFS and homelessness. More than half of our survey respondents had been involved in CFS before.
Osei-Yeboah says this data is vital to understanding the needs of the unhoused and to advocate for more resources. Former fashion mogul Peter Nygaard asks an Ontario court today to review a decision to deny him bail as he appeals his sexual assault convictions and sentence. Nygaard's legal team will argue the motions judge made several errors in dismissing the 83-year-old's bail application last month. The judge who rejected Nygaard's bail application at the time wrote his appeal appeared to be weak, adding he is a flight risk since he faces charges in other jurisdictions, including Winnipeg. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. And one last look at the forecast. Here's Avi Adiyemi.
We're looking at sunny skies in the south with highs around 6 degrees, while the north will be seeing cloudy conditions with light snow and temperatures around -3. Wind chill will make it feel even cooler this morning in most of the regions. Right now, Winnipeg, it's chilly outside. It's -1. Sunny skies will dominate the south, and Brampton, Gimli, Steinbach, Morris, and temperatures will be climbing to the mid-single digits and near 8 degrees.
Thank you, Abby. And May, one last look at the roads.
Just a quick heads up that South Perimeter at St. Mary's, all directions are closed in that intersection.
Okay, it's kind of a busy one out there. Thanks so much for tuning in this morning. I'm Emily Brass. Tomorrow the show will be live from North Dakota with Marcy Marcusa and Corey Funk. So tune in, and The Current is coming up next.